Boris Johnson resigns as Conservative Party leader but promises to remain as Prime Minister until a successor is found.
Good morning. It's 6 o'clock on Friday, the 8th of July. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Anne.
We're live across the whole of the UK. We're on your TV, your radio and online. So wherever you are and whatever you're up to, you can take us with you. This is what you're waking up to today.
Well, as we now know, Boris Johnson will be out of number 10 by October. In a speech outside Downing Street, he thanked the British public for their support and reiterated the government's commitment both to supporting Ukraine and levelling up the UK.
A timetable for the leadership election will be set out early next week, and early favourites include the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace, former Chancellor Rishi Sunak, and outsider Penny Mordaunt, who's Trade Minister.
Former Prime Minister John Major tells Boris Johnson to leave Downing Street as soon as possible. In a letter, he said it is unwise and unsustainable for him to stay in office.
So, what do you think? As ever, your views are what matter to us, so get in touch. gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can tweet us at GBNews. Should Boris Johnson stay until going to be about October, or should he go now? What do you think?
I'm wondering as well, if you could send him a personal tweet or just a personal email, what would you say to him at the moment?
Oh, that's a good one. I don't know.
I mean, would you... I couldn't help thinking... I think a lot of people are divided. You know, maybe it's best that he goes. It was a long time coming, but he saw the inevitable in the end. But, you know, he mentioned the herd who turned on him.
Yes.
And I couldn't help thinking, I mean, really, that was all... It was cruel. It always is cruel when they oust a Prime Minister, isn't it? It was cruel when they did it, I remember very much, to Theresa May, who got very upset, particularly to Margaret Thatcher, who couldn't believe it.
But they did it in sort of, at least in private with her.
Yes, but she was in tears when she left,
wasn't yes, she was, yeah.
David Cameron was very upset when he had to give his final speech, because I think you must feel, mustn't you, that everybody's against you, and why has the world turned against you? And...
But it's interesting, isn't it? Even if you, and love to know if this is the case for you, if you did support Boris Johnson, if you wanted him to stay on, did you then reach that point where you have to say, because everybody was resigning, well, you can't go on, actually. I mean, there was hitting the point where there's just no functioning government, so...
Yeah.
What option is
in
there?
the end, whatever, I suppose you might think he did the right thing in the end by going. But I just wonder, if you were a Boris supporter, or you still are a Boris supporter, is there anything you would like to say to him, just to sort of say, I don't know, don't worry, you'll make a fortune on the talking circuit, or, you know, don't worry, like Winston Churchill, you could come back. You could.
Of course.
And Churchill came back.
Churchill.
Yeah. And Churchill is his great hero, so he may well be thinking, all right, well, you know, they've beaten me this time, but and it was apparently appalling for Churchill when he wasn't voted back in, and he couldn't believe the country had turned on him after he'd led them through the war. But he did come back, and he did serve another term. Mind you, he never lost leadership of the Tory party. So he lost the election, but he didn't lose the leadership of the Tory party.
Also, who do you want to take over now? I mean, that's all the runners and riders in the papers. We're going to run you through all the details, of course, this morning.
Well, there are even rumours, aren't there, that he is thinking that if he can stay in as caretaker, he can convince the country to stick with him further. He still could convince the party not to actually get rid of him. Because, and a lot of people who noticed these things noticed he didn't actually resign as Prime Minister.
No.
He just said, you know, this has happened.
So, I mean, it's an interesting one.
So if you could send him a private message, what would that say, I wonder? And if you make it really rude, we won't be able to read it out, so don't bother. But it would just be nice if there's something interesting that you feel it would be nice to say to him at the moment.
Yeah, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Well, how did it all go so wrong for the Prime Minister that, in the end, his own party wanted to get him out from office?
Our national reporter Paul Hawkins has the latest.
The straw that broke Boris Johnson's back began on the 29th of June here at this private members' Tory club in central London. What happened here and how the PM dealt with it was the final nail in the coffin for his premiership. 2 days later, on the 1st of July, a story is printed alleging Tory Tamworth MP Chris Pincher was drunkenly groping men at the Carlton Club. He resigns as Deputy Chief Whip, saying he embarrassed himself after drinking too much, but denies the other allegations. The same day, Number 10 says the PM wasn't aware of specific allegations against Chris Pincher. But later that day, Parliament's watchdog receives a complaint against Chris Pincher and the whip is withdrawn from him. In other words, he now sits as an independent MP. On July the 3rd and 4th, two ministers both publicly say the PM didn't know about any specific allegations against Chris Pincher before making him Deputy Chief Whip in February. Then later on July the 4th, the line from Number 10 shifts. The Prime Minister was aware of some allegations. On July the 5th, Dominic Raab admits that Chris Pincher was investigated in 2019 over alleged inappropriate behaviour while he was a minister here at the Foreign Office. Half an hour later, former Chief Diplomat Simon MacDonald publishes a letter alleging Boris Johnson did know about the 2019 investigation and warning Number 10 it needs to come clean. 4.5 hours later, it did.
The Prime Minister did not immediately recall the conversation in late 2019 about this incident.
6 hours later came this.
You know, if I had my time again, I would think back on it and recognise that he wasn't going to learn any lesson, and he wasn't going to change. 2 minutes later, his health secretary resigns. 7 minutes later, his chancellor. By 9:30am on Thursday, 59 members of the government had resigned. Boris Johnson then quit, making him number 60.
The herd instinct is powerful. When the herd moves, it moves. And, my friends, in politics, no one is remotely indispensable.
Operation Save Big Dog had failed. Paul Hawkins, GB News.
Well, let's talk to political commentator Charlie Sansom, who's in the studio with us this morning. Good to see you.
Good morning.
So here we are. I mean, you were never a fan of the Prime Minister anyway, were you?
I wasn't, but I have to be honest, I feel a little bit sorry for him today.
So if you could send him a little private message, what would it say?
I'd wish him all the best. I don't have any personal animus towards him, obviously. I don't think he's finished, mind you. I don't think this is the last you're going to see of Boris Johnson. I just think it's the end for right now. And I do think he's brought a lot of it on himself.
In terms of where this leaves government, where this leaves the party, I mean, obviously we're in recess before too long. But is the idea of him being caretaker Prime Minister problematic?
I mean, I suppose the role of Deputy Prime Minister should come into play now if he does want to quit. But, you know, you'll notice that in his speech outside Number 10 yesterday that he didn't actually resign on. He never said the words. He's not been to see the Queen. So, effectively, he still is in charge.
That must have been deliberate, mustn't it?
I think so. I think he knows probably that there are many doubters in the Conservative Party about who can replace him, who has got that gravitas, that, you know, that personal appeal that he does seem to have with many millions of people still even today.
Well, I suppose he hasn't got any gravitas. That was never the point with him, was it?
I mean, maybe not in his own party right now, but it took them 6 months to get rid of him. You know, I asked for him to leave in December when I left the Conservative Party because I wasn't happy with the Partygate handling. I wasn't happy with COVID passports and the proposition of mandates. And it's taken 6 months for his own colleagues now to say we've had enough. I don't think what they've done is very moral, though, because they've all known what the situation is for such a long time. That I think now the writing's on the wall. They're now trying to work out how they can manoeuvre the situation in their favour.
Someone said to me just a couple of nights ago in Parliament, the problem with these people is they think the grass is always bluer on the other side, and it just isn't going to be.
I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, I don't think he's the only person in the party that can lead it. I know there's lots of talk today about who can take over. I would pay more attention to the people that aren't being mentioned rather than the people that are. I think Steve Baker's a great shout. I like him quite a lot. I know a lot of other Conservative friends of mine that like Esther McVeigh. She's not been mentioned just yet. We'll have to see what happens, but hopefully we find somebody who can fulfil the manifesto promises of 2019.
What about, I'll tell you what struck me, what about someone like Johnny Mercer, who got criticism on Wednesday because he stood up and asked a question about the armed forces? And it was, but he said, this is what I'm here to do. He's disciplined. He's determined.
Yeah.
He pursues what he very much sees as his job and his responsibility to his constituents and those people he represents.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know Johnny Mercer personally, but one of my friends does, and he served in the army, and he thinks he's an absolutely fantastic guy. So if he was to
He's got charisma, hasn't he?
Yeah,
he does.
And we need, nowadays, whether you think it's justifiable or not, nowadays you really do need charisma to become the leader of a party. I mean, that's what's holding Keir Starmer back, isn't it?
Yeah, I think British politics has moved away from policy towards personality. I think we're more Americanised than we'd like to admit.
And Boris sort of proved that, didn't he? Because he still believed that he is the one person who got the mandate, huge mandate from the British public. Where in actual fact, if strictly, actually, it was the party that got the mandate, not him.
I agree with that. I mean, I think, the figures that spring to mind in terms of personality, you go back to the 90s with Tony Blair, you could move forward leading into the Brexit conversation with Nigel Farage. He's a fantastic personality, and Boris has proven that as well. But I think a lot of the Conservative Party's success actually does come back to Nigel, actually, in a way, because if it wasn't for the Brexit Party making a deal not to be hostile towards the Tories in 2019, you might have a Labour government right now, so things could be even worse.
Oh, well, there you go. Charlie, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. It's going to be interesting to see. Johnny Mercer.
I know,
Could be quite interesting, actually.
I think we need somebody with charisma, and the ones that are being put up at the moment don't exactly beam charisma at you, do they?
Of course, he starred once in was it Head and Shoulders commercial?
What, Johnny Mercer did?
Johnny Mercer, there's a shot of him washing his hair in the shower.
No.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, that's a secret that won't do him down.
He won't do it down. I think that's work in his favour. You never know. Let us know what you think. Someone is going to have to take that job, whether you're a big Boris supporter or not. Now it's time for somebody new. So who would you like to see in that position?
Yeah, GBViews at gbnews.uk. And don't forget, you could also send us your idea of if there were a personal message you could send to him, what would you be saying to him and Carrie this morning?
OK, let's bring you up to date with the headlines at 12 minutes past 6. And the former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has been hospitalised after being shot while giving a campaign speech in the Japanese city of Nara. The Japanese broadcaster NHK said that Abe was in a state of cardiac arrest following the shooting. Chief Cabinet Secretary Hirokatsu Matsuno told a briefing that such an act of barbarity cannot be tolerated.
Ghislaine Maxwell has officially appealed against her sex trafficking sentence and conviction. Documents show that her appeal has now been sent to the US Court of Appeals. The British socialite was found guilty by a jury of luring young girls to the financier Jeffrey Epstein for him to sexually abuse between 1994 and 2004. She was sentenced to 20 years in prison at a court in New York last month.
About 240,000 state pensioners, mostly women, have been underpaid about, in total, £1.5 billion. The National Audit Office has been looking into what was being underpaid. The Department for Work and Pensions account shows 105,000 people have been affected more this year than last year. It includes those who were widowed. The Ministry of Justice has confirmed the mother of baby P has been released from prison. Tracy Connolly was jailed in 2009 for causing or allowing the death of her 17-month-old son at their home in Tottenham. Baby P, as you must remember, suffered more than 50 injuries, including fractured ribs and a broken back. A new study says more than 90% of schools in the UK are finding it difficult to recruit. Researchers from the Association of School and College Leaders surveyed nearly 800 head teachers. Most of them said educational standards may be at risk. Well, the race to replace Boris Johnson as Conservative Party leader has begun. The Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab, and former Secretary of State for Housing, Michael Gove, have both ruled themselves out. So, who are the main contenders? Who could be the next Prime Minister? Well, our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, takes a look now at the runners and riders.
For a long time, Rishi Sunak seemed the likely favourite in any leadership contest after he pushed through billions of extra funding to protect jobs when the pandemic struck. But the former Chancellor's stock took a bit of a battering more recently, following the revelations that his wife had non-domicile status for tax purposes and he'd held onto his US green card while serving in the government. But he still remains pretty popular within the party. In recent months, the Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, has clearly been positioning herself for a leadership run, appearing at times to channel her inner Margaret Thatcher with her high-profile interventions and photo opportunities. She has strong grassroots support within the party, and the war in Ukraine has certainly pushed up her public profile. It's done the same for the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace. The former army officer has been widely praised for his deft handling of the UK's military response to the crisis, a key figure in providing support and training for Ukraine's armed forces. He's admired as a highly capable cabinet minister who has widespread support from all wings of the party. Although he's played down any interest in the top job, he's a definite contender. Suella Braverman became the first cabinet minister to publicly announce her intention to stand during a television interview on Wednesday night. She was appointed Boris Johnson's Attorney General 2 years ago. She's positioning herself as an anti-woke candidate, but for now at least, she's not seen as one of the favourites. Tory rebel Steve Baker has pretty much confirmed he'll also be running for the top job. The Brexiteer, who played a leading role in orchestrating the resignation of Theresa May, might struggle to win over many on the left wing of the party, but he told GB he's getting lots of support from serious figures.
And I'm doing that out of respect for Conservative Home readers and the many people who I'm afraid, to the disappointment of my critics, are in fact lighting up my phone encouraging me to go for it. You know, people have watched me provide leadership for 7 years, sometimes for up to a third of the Conservative Party, and successfully.
Coming second to Boris Johnson in the last leadership election, Jeremy Hunt has been out of office for the past 3 years. But there's little doubt the former Foreign Secretary will seize the opportunity to throw his hat back into the ring. Although his strong support for tough lockdown measures during the pandemic won't sit well with some in the party. Well, less than 2 days after accepting the job as Chancellor and then robustly supporting Boris Johnson on the airwaves, Nadhim Zahawi pretty much wielded the killer blow by very publicly demanding the Prime Minister's resignation. Little surprise to those in the party who say he's been quietly plotting a leadership bid for months. He's certainly seen as a safe pair of hands. Well, the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, is highly popular on the right of the party, where they support her tough line on the small boats crisis. But her plans to send asylum seekers to Rwanda have run into inevitable legal obstacles. Her staunch support of Boris Johnson, while many others called on him to go, might also impact on her chances. The former Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, was the first to resign on Tuesday, sparking the final push to get rid of Boris Johnson. The former Chancellor and Home Secretary, he certainly has the political pedigree for the top job. He may not have the charisma of some of the other candidates, but he's clearly trying to position himself as a man of integrity. Back in January, Tom Tugendhat, the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, announced his intention to stand for leader should Boris Johnson be turfed out. A Remain supporter in 2016, the former soldier might struggle to cut through with many Brexiteers in the party, but he's greatly admired as a very capable and thoughtful politician.
Well, and as you can imagine, probably over the course of this breakfast programme this morning, there'll be others runners and riders, won't there?
You
Other
should
people will
think
be
so.
declaring.
You should think so. It'd be interesting to see who thinks they can get that support or garner that support. Because a lot of people do it not because they think they're going to win, but because they think it ups
It's a way of corralling support.
Yes, so that then they can get a decent cabinet job.
And also, at some point, it's all strategic. At some point, if they've got a lot of followers and people who would vote for them, they can then shift that vote to somebody else. It's all very tactical, quite cynical, I suppose, really.
Well, the first person to actually throw their hat into the ring was someone you may not be very familiar with, the Attorney General, Suella Braverman.
Yes, so let's ask, do people in her constituency think she's in with a chance? Our South West of England reporter Jeff Moody is in Fareham. So, Jeff, what do people locally think of their own MP perhaps becoming, or at least running, for the Prime Minister job?
Well, there's not too many people about at this time of the morning, but I have managed to speak to a couple of people who said, yes, they're very excited. She'd make a very, very good Prime Minister. She's certainly popular in her constituency and certainly has the support of her constituents. Suella, or to use her real name, Suellen Cassiana Braverman, was born in 1980. So whether she was named after that other famous Suellen Ewing, who was gracing our TV screens at the time, I don't know. But considering Suellen Ewing's penchant for drink, it certainly wouldn't be an optic that the Conservative Party would be looking to encourage at the moment. So she was born in 1980, lots of interests, particularly education, home affairs and justice. She's called for better education, better financial education in schools, looking at people, children learning more about how to budget money, very good idea, how to save money too. A prominent Brexiteer. 55% of her constituents followed suit and voted the same way as she did to leave the European Union. She also went on to chair the European Research Group, which was a pro-leave group of Conservative MPs. In 2018, she was appointed the Parliamentary Under-Secretary for the EU, so she's been very heavily involved in Brexit since the beginning, but she was one of the ones that quit in protest at Theresa May's deal. Feels like an awful long time ago, but only 2 or 3 years ago, that's what everyone was talking about. This huge crisis in Parliament as Theresa May tried to get that deal through the finishing line and didn't manage to do it. She was the one, Suella was one of the ones who quit in protest at that. She also is rumoured to have coined the phrase cultural Marxism. She said in 2018, "We have a culture evolving from the far left, which is about sniffing out freedom of speech." So we now know where she stands on the woke, anti-woke debate, very, very firmly anti-woke. Those comments that she made referring to the woke brigade as cultural Marxism didn't land particularly well. It was regarded at the time as hate speech, particularly by Jewish communities, and it actually took the Board of Deputy of British Jews to eventually come out and say, look, she is clearly a good friend of the Jewish community. Good friend of the Jewish community she may be. Whether she's Prime Minister material, we'll soon find out.
We will indeed. Jeff, thank you very much indeed. Well, so it's interesting that I think the 1922 committee are bringing forward various meetings to try and get all of this rolling now, because they want to...
It's in their hands now, really.
It's in their hands. As soon as they can elect a new leader, then the Prime Minister will have to go. We know there is a lot of people on the backbenches unhappy that he's going to hang about until potentially October.
Well, it could take that long anyway, because Parliament's in recess now from next week, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, yeah, from next week, which normally is downtime politically. Everybody goes back to their constituencies or goes on holiday and everything is seen as going very quiet. How can it go quiet at the moment? Because the country needs to be reassured that there is a functioning government. And Boris is clearly quite determined to be in charge of doing that at the moment, which is fascinating.
Yeah, we shall see what happens. Perhaps they'll get their skates on and get something done in the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Just reading in the Daily Express, he is a rock star and any replacement will just be a pale imitation.
Who says that? Carol Malone. Let us know what you think. It is 6:24. We're going to take a short break. But coming up, how will the Prime Minister's resignation go down on the world stage?
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne on your TV, online and on your radio. It's 6:26.
Yeah, we got lots of messages coming in. Thanks very much indeed. We were asking earlier if you could send a personal message to Boris right now, what would it be? What would it say? Lots of responses to that. Paul in Manchester, mine would be very well done, but you should never have sacked Dominic Cummings.
Paul in Nuneaton says, thank you, Boris, for what you've done for us in your short time as PM.
Margaret says, I'll miss you and good luck.
Alan says, politicians will always let you down, sometimes unintentionally. Remember, it's hard to soar like an eagle when all around you are turkeys. Good luck in your guest speaking career.
Oh, he'll do very well on the speaking circuit, won't he? Joe says, I'm in Christchurch, New Zealand, but I am a UK citizen. I would write to Boris and say he has to leave now because lots of the country don't support him and a lot of his cabinet too. I do feel sorry for him, though.
Linda says, please call a general election now.
Couldn't now, could he?
No.
Although justifiably, he could go to the Queen and say, I cannot form a government, because that's usually the best reason for calling a snap general election.
But he's got a government.
Yeah, but not, well, you could argue not a functioning one. Alan says, I would say to Boris, resign as a Tory MP and stand as an independent, thus enabling him to set up a new political party promoting true conservatism.
Which is interesting, Alan, because, of course, one of the big criticisms against him is that he's not actually a sort of conservative Prime Minister.
He's not, yes, that's
right. Because we've got higher taxes, which you can say is all down to the circumstances we're in, or have been in over the last few years. Interesting point.
Jonathan says, yes, Anne, he never used the word resignation in his speech. And I've been arguing this since the dramatic and robust moments on the steps of Number 10. Boris always has a plan. I can't see this being Boris's endgame. He has too much support across the country.
Interesting, and I mean, it's interesting, and our political commentator was saying that the problem is, if he wants to sort of get back to the top of the Conservative Party, he can't do that because that's voted by MPs. MPs have, I mean, the party, the members of the party sort of select the last two, and then MPs vote on those. I think that's how it works, isn't it? Or is it the way around? I can't remember. But anyway, so I don't think he can do it. But we shall see. Anyway, of course, he has been big on the world stage, and Ukraine has thanked Boris Johnson for realising the threat of the Russian monster, saying the Prime Minister has shown the most support of any leader.
Well, Mr. Johnson addressed the Ukrainian people in his statement yesterday on the steps of Number 10, saying the UK will continue to back your fight for freedom for as long as it takes.
But even if Britain is a key ally, what next for the war-torn country?
Well, for more, let's speak to Lesia Vasilenko, the People's Deputy of Ukraine and Member of Parliament in Ukraine, and she's joining us live from Berlin. A very good morning to you. Thank you very much for joining us. What did you think that even in his resignation speech, in a time of domestic crisis, Mr. Johnson actually did still pledge support for Ukraine? Were you pleased to hear that?
Of course, and I think it was a message to whoever comes next that Ukraine should and must stay at the forefront, at the top of the agenda, so to speak. Because really, Ukraine, it's not just about the independence of Ukraine and Ukrainians and the existence of a whole country. It's also about the stability and it's also about long-standing peace and security across the globe. And Boris Johnson very well understood that. And my hope is that every single member of the Conservative Party and whoever comes next also has a clear understanding of that.
How would you describe Boris Johnson as a world leader?
He definitely pushed other leaders to do more and to say more on Ukraine. I think that his uncompromising stance on condemning Russian aggression, but not just in word, but also in action, proved to be an example to some of the leaders of the free world who might have been wavering in their decision-making and in their choice whether to speak on Ukraine and how to speak on Ukraine.
I mean, the talk here in Britain is whether or not he will stay as Prime Minister for the next few months. Would Ukraine rather welcome him staying for the next few months at least, until we know who's in charge?
I mean, for Ukraine, we would prefer the status quo. So we would prefer things to stay as they are because we know how Boris feels about Ukraine. We've seen him in Ukraine, in Kiev, at not exactly the safest moment in the capital. We have seen his determination and the determination of his cabinet to stand with Ukraine. Again, not just in word, but in action. So for us, it's always better the devil you know kind of approach. And the longer things stay as they are, the more comfortable we are. But having said that, I'm also confident in the British Parliament, in the British political milieu, that every single member of Parliament and subsequently of the British government would be in support of Ukraine and would be strong and loud on the Ukrainian issues.
OK, Lesia Vasilenko, good to talk to you this morning. Thank you, appreciate it. Philip's been in touch. He says Boris should stay until October. Now more than any time in our history, we need continuation and a smooth transition. Acting in haste is not a good idea. John Major is a forgotten man and should keep his thoughts to himself.
Shirley says, I'm so angry with the Conservative Party. Rats leaving the sinking ship that they themselves have scuppered. Yes, Boris has lied, but show me a politician who hasn't. He has done more for this country. The Tories have shot themselves in the foot, and shame on the lot of them. That's me, out.
Oh, OK, keep your thoughts coming through. gbviews@gbnews.uk. And don't go anywhere, because we're going to take you through the papers in a couple of minutes with Ella Whelan and Benedict Spence.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
6:35, morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Right, joining us to look through the papers this morning, Benedict Spence and Ella Whelan. A very good morning to both of you. Right, what are we going to start with? Because nearly every newspaper is sort of leading on the same, well, as you can imagine, on exactly the same story. So, Ella, to the Daily Mail.
Yes, and each paper has their own particular slant on interpreting what's happened, with the Daily Mail running with what the hell have they done? Essentially highlighting the fact that they say the corks are popping in Brussels and Moscow and the Tories don't have a clue who should replace Boris, which is, there is this suggestion that with polls showing that the Labour Party is, if not ahead, certainly much further than it ever has been in relation to support across the country, throwing, what Boris Johnson himself in his resignation speech called an eccentric move to throw the country into some form of chaos, whether it's a leadership election or an actual election. All these rumours are still flying around at the moment. Is perhaps a bit dangerous. And the Daily Mail goes into, has some pictures of him hugging his family inside and sort of consoling scenes. But there's one thing that they pick up on, which I think is really interesting, which is that there is this row over whether or not he's going to stay or whether he's going to go come October. And it points out that Boris Johnson has told the Cabinet that he would not seek to implement any new policies or make any major changes of direction. So basically, don't worry, I'm not going to do anything. Maybe I'll get married in checkers, but anyway, that's rumours at the moment. But I'm not going to do anything drastic. And while that might sound like, a smooth transition, a kind of the thing that's needed, actually you have to just zoom out a second and say, we're in the middle of several crises, whether, cost of living crises, fuel, things happening in Ukraine. A Prime Minister promising that for months he's not going to do anything really drastic is probably not, it's not what you want to hear. It's probably, there is a danger to that, which is that, well, what if something drastic does have to happen?
Yes, you need somebody who's capable of making
a decisive decision.
Something we needed.
Yes, I think that probably only lends fuel to the fire that says he's got to go, because there has to be somebody in charge who is able to meet. We know that things change week by week in politics.
But on that hand, an interim Prime Minister would not be able to make particularly big decisions either, because they wouldn't have the mandate. So it's a case of expediting the election of somebody new, isn't it?
Yes, and that's the problem. And I think that's why the message on the front of the Mail, which is, this whole kind of idea of, they call it party in the grip of collective hysteria, probably has some truth to it. Because, if there was ever I'm not a fan of Boris Johnson. I've never really been. And I can't say I managed to squeeze out any crocodile tears for him over the last few days. But there is something important about saying that at a time when a nation is in a series of crises, you have this exceedingly indulgent game of Westminster musical chairs that I think a lot of people outside of SW1 are thinking,
do you think they gave into
sake.
Mob mentality?
Well, I think he definitely was kind of sidestepping blame when he talked about the herd. But that is how the Conservative Party runs. I mean, that is historic. It's almost like a sort of...
Well, it's how all parties run, though, isn't it?
But yes, but particularly the Conservative Party has this, lots of the papers talk about the fact that we have this, the Conservative Party has these periods of collective mania where they sort of just freak out and go off the rails for a while and throw things up in the air. And we know that, there's been Cameron, there's Theresa May, there's Boris Johnson. There's kind of have a problem with holding on to their leaders. And I just think I can't emphasise enough the fact that this really does feel incredible. I mean, it's happened now, so you have to deal with it, but it does feel incredibly indulgent to lots of people. I was on a hospital appointment the other day and, in the middle of a Labour heartland in Hackney, and lots of the nurses who, are not diehard Tory voters, we got talking, were saying, why can't they just leave Boris alone? Which was expressing a kind of sentiment of, I don't want to listen to leadership elections for the next few months.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Benedict, there in the Telegraph, you've been looking at the fact that they're saying this long goodbye, however long it takes, leaves the country in a state of paralysis.
Yes, paralysis, I think, is a particularly terrifying thing for you to ever have in politics. I mean, it worked for Belgium, but that's by the by. I think really what we're seeing here is there's been so much speculation actually for months really about Boris Johnson's future, but always the thing that you hear is, well, who's going to replace him? There isn't an obvious choice. Nobody is, sort of leaps out at you. And I think that in itself is a bit of a failing of the Conservative Party, of the higher-ups in the Conservative Party. Now, if you were being kind, you might say nobody was prepared to sort of put their head above the parapet in the interests of not rocking the boat. They didn't want there to be any sort of, rupture in the party. If you were being a little bit cynical, you might say it's because that person, whoever they were, didn't want to put a target on their back. They didn't want to be the person who, Team Boris went after and, fired the starting gun and in doing so sort of ruled themselves out of the race. But the problem is, now that he is going, we find ourselves, as Ella points out, in the midst of a situation where there isn't somebody to fill the vacuum straight away. There is going to be this sort of protracted period where there are hustings, where there is leadership contests. And you can imagine, partly because there are no obvious candidates that sort of leap out at you, there will be an awful lot of people who run. And that does seem to be the feeling, is that it's honestly, it's almost open season. We had Suella Braverman come out as the first person yesterday. I don't think anybody had her down as a particularly standout person, and yet she's running. Who knows who will decide to and who won't decide to? Because that's also the other big thing. Is that
there's always a lot of silliness as well, though, isn't there?
There
People
is.
who don't stand a chance put their names forward for tactical reasons.
Yeah, and this is the thing, actually. Right now, the country can't afford to not have a Prime Minister, a functioning Prime Minister, for months at a time, but purely by virtue of the fact that there are so many possible candidates, we can't afford really to get sort of bumped into having the wrong one. And, in the interest of just getting one, of just saying, oh, well, you're the most senior person, Dominic Raab, so you can be Prime Minister. We can't really afford that either, because we do find ourselves in a position where there are any number of issues that require a firm hand on the tiller and require leadership. And the Conservative Party has shown very little of that up to now.
And in terms of those big issues, I mean, there's so much going on domestically, Ella, but as The Guardian points out, on the international stage, a huge amount too. And they say that Mr. Johnson's end is met with glee in Moscow. It's an interesting line from The Guardian, who were desperate for him to go.
Yes, definitely. I mean, they really go into it, quoting Maria Zakharova, who was the foreign ministry spokesman in Russia, saying the moral of the story is, do not seek to destroy Russia. Russia cannot be destroyed. You can break your teeth on it and then choke on them. So, not mincing words from the Kremlin, but the contrast view is that the Zelensky came out and said that he was saddened by Johnson's loss. And you just spoke to somebody in Ukraine who was talking about the fact that Johnson was always, the one thing that you can say about him is that he, unlike other leaders who were slow off the starting mark to support Ukraine, both materially and also sort of polemically at the dispatch box, he's a favourite in Ukraine, and he is someone who has done some very good things in relation to expressing
from what
support.
we were hearing just a few minutes ago, they would be rather pleased if he hung on in there.
Yes, they would be. Because, well, I mean, from their point of view, as your guest, pointed out, the name of the game is continuity. Is not to have a shake-up. Is to have someone who, I mean, I think she used the phrase "the devil, better the devil you know,"
yes, which is
not exactly the best kind of praise. But there,
you know what she meant. Yeah.
There is an important question, which is, I'm sort of harking back to the fact that the chaos is not good for us, which is that if you have big questions of whether or not to send more military aid, whether or not to make an even bigger impact in Ukraine, whether to step it back. And each leadership hopeful have very different views on that. So someone like Tom Tugendhat, for example, has, in relation to his history with Afghanistan and things like that, and his approach to China has, rather unfavourably been called in some circles a warmonger. He's somebody who has a particular position that could affect that relationship. Others have different positions. So that's also it's not just domestic issues at play. The war in Ukraine is a very serious thing to think about when thinking about the next Prime Minister.
It's affecting us all, isn't it?
We're out of time. Benedict, Ella, thank you. We'll catch up with you a little bit later on. Let's just run you through some of the other key stories today. And the former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has been hospitalised after being shot. It happened while he was giving a campaign speech in the city of Nara. The broadcaster NHK said that Shinzo Abe was in a state of cardiac arrest following the shooting.
The Ministry of Justice has confirmed the mother of baby P has been released from prison. Tracy Connolly was jailed in 2009 for causing or allowing the death of her 17-month-old son at their home in Tottenham. Baby P, if you remember, suffered more than 50 injuries, including fractured ribs and a broken back.
The UK is set to be hotter than Los Angeles today, temperatures reaching 30 Celsius across England and Wales. The Met Office says it will be consistently warm over the next few days, paving the way for an official heat wave. UK Health Security Agency has issued a Level 2 heat health alert warning for next week. That covers the east of England, southeast of England and London.
I think we always have to watch out when we say there's a heat wave in the country, when it's just the southeast and London.
Otherwise, everyone in Inverness is going to be emailing in.
Yes, that's right, indeed, yeah. But I hope it's nice wherever you are and you get a bit of sunshine anyway.
Yeah.
It was lovely to see the sun yesterday afternoon in my home. Absolutely fantastic.
It was warm this morning, actually.
It was warm overnight, don't you think? It was quite a hot night last night.
Yeah.
But as I say, if that's only us in the southeast at the moment or the Midlands or whatever area, then I do beg your pardon.
Yes, indeed. Quite right too. Now, of course, back to what we have to talk about today, which is the race on for the leadership of the Conservative Party after the Prime Minister resigned as party leader yesterday. He is, as we keep saying, due to remain in office until a successor is found.
Well, let's get more reaction then from MP for Shipley, Philip Davis, who is also one of our GB News presenters. Hello there, and my goodness, what a rough and tumble last 24 hours has been, or 48 hours has been. How are you feeling? Are you shell-shocked at the moment?
Morning, Anne and Stephen. Yeah, no, it's been a bit of a circus, hasn't it? The last few days, and so yes, things have happened very quickly. So yeah, I think we're all a bit shell-shocked, really, about what's happened over the last few days. It's been quite surreal, really.
What do you make of the runners and riders so far? I'll tell you what's interesting, Philip, because we can sort of talk to you as a colleague rather than just an MP in all of this. We know when MPs are asked who are you likely to support, of course, nobody wants to say because it's all about positioning yourself for getting a sort of cabinet job or a ministerial job at some point in the future. I mean, is that a pressure that you're now going to have to face, you and Esther, of course?
Well, certainly not for me, Stephen, because I don't want a job. I said in my maiden speech in Parliament that I wouldn't accept a promotion, and that certainly hasn't changed in the last 17 years. So I'm in a good position. I don't want a job. I'm not horse trading for anything. I just need to pick who I think is the best person for the country and for my constituents. And I genuinely don't know who that is. I mean, I'm a pretty straight shooter, I like to think, and so if I was supporting a particular candidate, I'd be perfectly happy to tell you two privately and publicly. But I genuinely don't know who that is and what I intend to. I don't even know who's running yet, to be honest. So I will see who the runners and riders are. I will speak to them all personally, and then I'll decide who I think has got the best programme for the country and my constituency. But I genuinely don't know who that is at the moment.
Do you think there are a lot of MPs like you who genuinely don't know who they would vote for if we knew the list of runners and riders? We can only suspect. Do you think there's a lot of uncertainty?
Definitely. Absolutely. There's definitely a lot of people who are not aligned to any camp or are not sort of agitating for anybody. I've spoken to a few colleagues and a surprising number don't know themselves who to vote for as yet. So there's plenty to go at for the various candidates.
This is an opportunity, isn't it, though, for somebody comparatively new, someone who's not on on the radar, as it were. A bit like we saw when David Cameron took over as leader back in, I don't know, what was it, 2007, 2008, something like that. I have to say, I've been saying this morning, what about someone like Johnny Mercer?
Well, look, it's an open field, and so you're right to that extent. I don't think there's any sort of overwhelming favourite, and therefore there's always the scope, certainly in a Conservative Party election, for somebody to come through the middle or somebody who's relatively unknown to the public to shine over the next couple of weeks. I think that the only difference is with, say, David Cameron, is that it's a lot easier for somebody unknown to take over as leader of the opposition, because they've got then 4 years or so to establish themselves with the public and prepare for government. Obviously, whoever wins this contest is going to go straight in as Prime Minister. And that's a very, very different thing altogether. So it makes it harder, I think, for somebody who is not well established to win the contest. But, yeah, it's by no means impossible.
Of course, the big talk today, and will be for the next few days, or weeks maybe, is whether Boris should hang on in there now as caretaker Prime Minister or somebody else take over that role. And I just wonder what you think, what your constituents feel and voters throughout the country feel about the pretty unedifying process that has just happened over the last 48 hours. Boris Johnson himself called it when the herd turns. What do you think ordinary people will think of all that?
Well, look, inevitably in these things, there'll be some of my constituents who are delighted at the turn of events over the last few days, and there'll be some of my constituents who are very, very disappointed, and some of them who are angry about it. So, I mean, I guess in that sense, Boris was quite a Marmite figure in that regard. Some people absolutely loved him. And some people don't. I guess that's the case with all of us in politics to a certain extent, but maybe Boris more than most. Look, I don't see any argument why Boris shouldn't continue. I don't understand this idea that he should have to step down straight away. When Theresa May resigned in similar circumstances, she carried on, and nobody batted an eyelid about that. When David Cameron resigned, he carried on until we'd found a successor, and nobody batted an eyelid about that either. I mean, that's what always happens, is that the current Prime Minister and the current leader stays on until a successor's been chosen. And so, aside from people who are just sort of so hostile to Boris, they're sort of blinded by it, I don't really see any argument or reason why Boris shouldn't continue until a successor's been found. That's how we always do these things.
OK, Philip, good to talk to you. Thank you. Catch up with you soon, no doubt. Let's head to Loughton in Essex and one of our viewers and listeners, Terry Donoghue. Morning to you, Terry. What do you make of what Philip said? Should the PM be allowed to keep being PM until later on in the year?
Well, morning.
Morning.
I really don't know. I haven't got a view on that. I think he's glad. I'm personally glad that he's gone, and I think he should have gone weeks ago. He's done. I don't think he's done a very good job. He got an 80-seat majority to get us out of Brexit. Because of Brexit, he got that majority. I don't think he'd get that majority anywhere near that now if he was to go to the country tomorrow. I think they'd take a real hammering. But we'll never know. He's going to hang on in there as long as he can, which I don't think is good for us.
Who would you put your money behind, then, to be the next leader?
That's a $1 million question. How can you, to be honest with you, how can you pick any of them? Have you got confidence in any of them? Because I haven't. Even the Labour Party. Come on, who's going to be leader? Who knows? We're in a terrible state. Our politics is a terrible state, and it's we can do nothing about it. We've only got those they put in front of us.
Interesting. Look, Terry, we've got to leave it there because we're really tight for time. It's really interesting to hear your views. Thank you. Do you agree with what Terry has to say? Have you lost confidence in everybody? Or do you have a different persuasion? GB Views at GBNews.
Yeah, one of your GB Views is Anthony says, I am a supporter of Boris Johnson, but I'm glad he stood down, not for the Conservative Party or for the country, but for him and his family. The treatment he has received at the hands of his own party has been appalling. If I could send him a personal tweet, it would simply say thank you and sorry.
Well, there you go. Keep your thoughts coming through. But now it's time for On Your Doorstep.
Now, some of you may know Bridlington in East Yorkshire as a seaside town. But did you know it's also the largest lobster port in Europe, with the fishing industry worth millions to the local economy?
And it's been a safe seat for all the Conservatives to date. Let's talk to our reporter Anna Riley, who's there for us this morning. Morning to you, Anna.
Good morning, Stephen. Yes, I'm in sunny Bridlington, and as you say, this is a safe Conservative seat. We're here at Ivanhoe Guest House, and we're going to speak to the owner about her views. Good morning, you're live on GB News. Introduce yourself for us.
Good morning, I'm Wendy and I'm the owner of the Ivanhoe Guest House. Would you like to come on in?
I would, thank you, Wendy. Thank you for having us.
You're very welcome.
So, Wendy, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
We've owned the Ivanhoe here for about 4 years, and we're a family-run business. And we welcome everybody who wants to come and stay with us.
And thank you for having us as well. So what we're talking about at the moment, what the news is, you know, not just in Britain, but globally people are talking about it. Boris Johnson stepping down as Prime Minister. What's your take on that?
Thank goodness. I'm really glad to see the back of him. I think as a business owner, we'll always be really grateful to his government for all of the financial support that we had getting us through the pandemic, because I don't think we'd have kept our home and our business otherwise. However, the man just doesn't seem to have any integrity, and I think whatever job you do and whatever walk of life you're in, integrity is really important. So I really do think it was time to go. He's done the right thing.
And Bridlington, it is a safe Conservative seat. How did you vote last time, and will it change in the next election?
That's a really difficult question. I've always been a Labour voter, but admittedly I did vote Conservative because I felt there was a lot of uncertainty and I didn't think that was good for the country and for anybody. So on this occasion I did vote Conservative because I wanted to get Brexit done. But with hindsight, I felt that I made a mistake, and if I'm honest, I think we'd have been better staying as part of Europe now that we know sort of all the chaos that it's caused, and particularly in our industry, because it's caused a lot of issues with supply chains, with staffing. So, you know, with hindsight, I would have done it differently, but I didn't.
And next Prime Minister, who do you think that should be?
That's really hard, because normally there is somebody that I feel is kind of on the same page as me and sort of inspires me, but at the moment, there really isn't anybody. In fact, I'd say I could do a better job myself. Big-headed, I know, but I do. There's nobody there at the moment that kind of speaks to me as a voter.
Thank you so much for speaking to us this morning, Wendy. And Stephen and Anne, if you do get to Bridlington, it's a lovely guest house here. Do come and visit.
No, I think we might just do that. Anna, thank you very much
indeed. It was a lobster pot either, did you?
No idea.
No idea, but there you go.
There you go. Isn't it interesting, though, Wendy saying nobody speaks to her at the moment? So we need, I mean, that's what you need. You need someone who's going to speak to you.
Well, we are.
Inspire you to vote, if you like. Let us know what you think. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Of course, coming up, we're going to bring you all the very latest on the future of the Conservative Party, the future of the government. What is it going to hold in store by the end of the year? Just don't know at the moment. We'll bring you all the best knowledge we can on that in a couple of minutes.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Boris Johnson resigns as Conservative Party leader but promises to remain Prime Minister until a successor is found.
Good morning. It's 7 o'clock on Friday, the 8th of July. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Anne.
We're live across the whole of the UK, on your TV, online, on your radio, wherever you are, whatever you're up to, you don't have to miss a thing. And this is what you're waking up to today.
Boris Johnson will be out of number 10 by October. In a speech outside Downing Street, he thanked the British public for their support and reiterated the government's commitment both to supporting Ukraine and levelling up the UK.
A timetable for the leadership election will be set out next week. Early favourites include the Defence Secretary, the former Chancellor Rishi Sunak, and Penny Mordaunt, who's Trade Minister.
Former Prime Minister John Major tells Boris Johnson to leave Downing Street as soon as possible. In a letter, he said it's unwise and unsustainable for him to stay in office.
Well, what do you think? Loads of you getting in touch this morning. GBviews at gbnews.uk. You can tweet us as well at GBnews.
And you can stay up to date by subscribing to the GB News YouTube channel. We're less than 1,000 subscribers away from 500,000, which would be quite a breakthrough. So we'd love to break through that this morning, please.
It's interesting that Leslie in Sussex has been in touch and said, I find it very hard to believe that the only messages you're getting are in support of Boris. If that's true, then the country has really lost its moral compass. We don't filter the messages, Leslie. I'll tell you that for nothing.
No, we don't.
I mean, there are one or two coming through who are, you know, like you, not supporting Boris. Brett says, I've no longer have any confidence in the current government. Until the cancer has been removed and the whole of government is free from corruption, I don't think I can have any confidence.
I was asking earlier, what sort of private message would you send Boris if you could send him a quick tweet or a quick email this morning? And Juliana said, if I wrote to Boris, my advice to him would be never take anything for granted. He started well, made a lot of promises regarding Brexit, and he never kept them. He is also a liar and can't be trusted. I will urge him to get Brexit done for real. He really insults people's intelligence by pretending he got Brexit done. Big fat lie. He has not done Brexit, as he has not taken any of the advantages from being unshackled from the EU. So you see, there is a lot of criticism too. I think people are just sort of... I just found it a bit unedifying, the whole spectacle of, you know, getting the way they got rid of him in the last 24 hours. But I suppose that we wouldn't have seen that had he just gone. Had he just resigned earlier.
With sort of more dignity, if you like.
It wasn't dignified, was it?
It wasn't dignified.
And I suppose you have to say that a lot of that was his fault.
Is it ever?
No, it wasn't for Theresa May. It wasn't for Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah.
It wasn't even for Gordon Brown. Do you remember him walking down Downing Street with his little boys? It's just a horrible business, I think.
Who'd want to be Prime Minister?
Why exactly?
Well, plenty of people, actually, but I mean, I have no idea why. So how did it all go so wrong for the Prime Minister that his own party really sought to oust him from office?
Our national reporter Paul Hawkins has the very latest for you.
The straw that broke Boris Johnson's back began on the 29th of June here at this private members' Tory club in central London. What happened here and how the PM dealt with it was the final nail in the coffin for his premiership. 2 days later, on the 1st of July, a story is printed alleging Tory Tamworth MP Chris Pincher was drunkenly groping men at the Carlton Club. He resigns as Deputy Chief Whip, saying he embarrassed himself after drinking too much, but denies the other allegations. The same day, Number 10 says the PM wasn't aware of specific allegations against Chris Pincher. But later that day, Parliament's watchdog receives a complaint against Chris Pincher and the whip is withdrawn from him. In other words, he now sits as an independent MP. On July the 3rd and 4th, two ministers both publicly say the PM didn't know about any specific allegations against Chris Pincher before making him Deputy Chief Whip in February. Then later on July the 4th, the line from Number 10 shifts. The Prime Minister was aware of some allegations. On July the 5th, Dominic Raab admits that Chris Pincher was investigated in 2019 over alleged inappropriate behaviour while he was a minister here at the Foreign Office. Half an hour later, former Chief Diplomat Simon MacDonald publishes a letter alleging Boris Johnson did know about the 2019 investigation and warning Number 10 it needs to come clean. 4.5 hours later, it did.
The Prime Minister did not immediately recall the conversation in late 2019 about this incident.
6 hours later came this.
You know, if I had my time again, I would think back on it and recognise that he wasn't going to learn any lesson and he wasn't going to change.
2 minutes later, his Health Secretary resigns. 7 minutes later, his Chancellor. By 9:30 a.m. on Thursday, 59 members of the government had resigned. Boris Johnson then quit, making him number 60.
The herd instinct is powerful. When the herd moves, it moves. And, my friends, in politics, no one is remotely indispensable.
Operation Save Big Dog had failed. Paul Hawkins, GB News.
Well, let's head to Downing Street and our political correspondent, Tom Harwood. Morning to you, Tom. Look, I mean, there's a lot of pressure now on the Prime Minister to get out of Number 10. Oh, no, Tom can hear us.
No.
Tom, can you hear us
Hello, Tom,
this
can you
morning?
hear us? Or is the picture just frozen, maybe? No, I don't think we've
we'll
got
sort
through
it out.
there. Yeah.
Either way, I think he's had a haircut.
Yes, he
I noticed
has.
that yesterday. I thought he had a
I thought you meant the Prime Minister at first. I thought, no way has he had a haircut.
No, well, he just get regular. I know his hairdresser.
He has a hairdresser?
Yes, Kelly. Yeah, she does his hair, but of course she gets a lot of stick. She does it very nicely, but then he...
Yes, well, you see, whenever he does an interview, you see him do that first, don't you? And there are some charming pictures of him inside Number 10 as he came in from that shot you just saw. And he then hugged his little boy as well. And I must say, both children have an absolute shock of blonde hair, don't they?
They do.
So they've taken after their dad from that point of view, although Carrie's blonde as well, I suppose.
Yeah. Tom, it's interesting. Tom says, do you really believe people voted for the Tories and not for Boris? Mrs May had an election and ended up with 8 seats short of a majority. Boris took over and got an 80-seat majority. I mean, I think people did vote for Boris that way. I mean, that charisma does make a huge difference. But when that charisma wanes as a result of, as Dave said, Johnson did make mistakes and bad errors of judgment, but none any more serious than sort of a human resources issue.
Patrick says, Anne wants a new Prime Minister with charisma. Come on, you couldn't wait to get rid of the most charismatic Prime Minister since Churchill. He was no saint, but who is? Certainly nobody in Parliament. It's the most corrupt workplace in the world. Well, it is political, I suppose, isn't it? Any political centre is going to be...
When you deal with politics and politicians, we talk about the political game, don't we? I mean, it is sort of a bit like a game. You have to play the game. But of course, it's the people playing the game who actually deal with all of our lives.
Yes.
So it's a very odd business. There you go.
Well, and as we've continually said, who would want to do it? Who would want to be Prime Minister? Well, Boris still does want to be, but there are lots of other people who fancy themselves, I suppose. Yeah. And the race to replace Boris Johnson as Conservative Party leader and therefore Prime Minister,
Well, the race has begun. The Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab, and former Secretary of State for Housing, Michael Gove, well, they've both ruled themselves out.
So, who are the main contenders? Who could be the next Prime Minister? Mark White takes a look now at the runners and riders.
For a long time, Rishi Sunak seemed the likely favourite in any leadership contest after he pushed through billions of extra funding to protect jobs when the pandemic struck. But the former Chancellor's stock took a bit of a battering more recently, following the revelations that his wife had non-domicile status for tax purposes and he'd held onto his US green card while serving in the government. But he still remains pretty popular within the party. In recent months, the Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, has clearly been positioning herself for a leadership run, appearing at times to channel her inner Margaret Thatcher with her high-profile interventions and photo opportunities. She has strong grassroots support within the party, and the war in Ukraine has certainly pushed up her public profile. It's done the same for the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace. The former army officer has been widely praised for his deft handling of the UK's military response to the crisis, a key figure in providing support and training for Ukraine's armed forces. He's admired as a highly capable cabinet minister who has widespread support from all wings of the party. Although he's played down any interest in the top job, he's a definite contender. Suella Braverman became the first cabinet minister to publicly announce her intention to stand during a television interview on Wednesday night. She was appointed Boris Johnson's Attorney General 2 years ago. She's positioning herself as an anti-woke candidate, but for now at least, she's not seen as one of the favourites. Tory rebel Steve Baker has pretty much confirmed he'll also be running for the top job. The Brexiteer, who played a leading role in orchestrating the resignation of Theresa May, might struggle to win over many on the left wing of the party, but he told GB News he's getting lots of support from serious figures.
And I'm doing it out of respect for Conservative Home readers and the many people who I'm afraid, to the disappointment of my critics, are in fact lighting up my phone encouraging me to go for it. You know, people have watched me provide leadership for 7 years, sometimes for up to a third of the Conservative Party, and successfully.
Coming second to Boris Johnson in the last leadership election, Jeremy Hunt has been out of office for the past 3 years. But there's little doubt the former Foreign Secretary will seize the opportunity to throw his hat back into the ring. Although his strong support for tough lockdown measures during the pandemic won't sit well with some in the party. Well, less than 2 days after accepting the job as Chancellor and then robustly supporting Boris Johnson on the airwaves, Nadhim Zahawi pretty much wielded the killer blow by very publicly demanding the Prime Minister's resignation. Little surprise to those in the party who say he's been quietly plotting a leadership bid for months. He's certainly seen as a safe pair of hands. Well, the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, is highly popular on the right of the party, where they support her tough line on the small boats crisis. But her plans to send asylum seekers to Rwanda have run into inevitable legal obstacles. Her staunch support of Boris Johnson, while many others called on him to go, might also impact on her chances. The former Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, was the first to resign on Tuesday, sparking the final push to get rid of Boris Johnson. The former Chancellor and Home Secretary, he certainly has the political pedigree for the top job. He may not have the charisma of some of the other candidates, but he's clearly trying to position himself as a man of integrity. Back in January, Tom Tugendhat, the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, announced his intention to stand for leader should Boris Johnson be turfed out. A Remain supporter in 2016, the former soldier might struggle to cut through with many Brexiteers in the party, but he's greatly admired as a very capable and thoughtful politician.
So where's your money? Who do you fancy?
And that's just the runners and riders
so far. It's going to change. Gilly John's been in touch. Jill, morning to you. She said, we live in times where the new kingmakers are the media. It's dangerous and undemocratic. I don't think I've ever loathed a profession more. But
What, media? No, we report on what's going on. Don't you think
but do you know what? I sort of agree with her. I sort of agree with Jill in that, I mean, more the papers than the broadcasters, but you just push people in a direction. I sort of agree. I mean, I don't like saying that people loathe what we do, but I think you've got a point.
Don't you think as well, though, that Dominic Raab and Michael Gove saying from the very beginning that they will not stand, they see themselves as kingmakers, don't you think?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's going to be so much work behind the scenes going on, and Michael Gove's very good at that sort of thing.
But he has been described as a snake in the grass again, because, I mean, he did this to Boris Johnson.
Well, he allegedly stabbed him in the front, didn't he?
Stabbed him in the front. That was when Theresa May ended up being PM, wasn't it? So he's not painted himself in any... And not that has he done anything wrong? Well, possibly not, but it's...
But he must accept that he wouldn't actually stand a chance, I suppose, to be leader, but he is definitely a kingmaker because he's a mover behind the scenes. Michael Gove is a very experienced man. I'm not so sure about Dominic Raab, but he may well see himself in the same position.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Let's bring you up to date with the headlines. It is 7:15 and the Japanese government says its former Prime Minister is in a grave condition after being shot at a campaign event. Japanese broadcaster has said Shinzo Abe appears to have been shot from behind when he was giving a speech in the city of Nara. The current Prime Minister, Fumio Kishida, said he condemns the act in the strongest of terms.
Around 240,000 state pensioners, mostly women, have been underpaid, a total of almost £1.5 billion. The problem apparently dates back to 1985 and relates to the old state pension system. They include widows and divorcees who could have been underpaid for years.
A High Court judge is set to rule on the later stage of the Duke of Sussex's libel suit against the publishers of the Daily Mail, Associated Newspapers Limited. The legal team argue that a story in February in the Mail on Sunday stated Harry had lied while covering up his dispute with the government over personal security. The paper's lawyers argue the article does not allege dishonesty against the Duke.
Well, we'll have more on that royal story a bit later on in the programme this morning.
In the meantime, let's return to the world of politics and what's going on in Downing Street. Our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, is there for us this morning. I mean, it's fascinating, Tom. We know the Prime Minister is going. We just don't quite know when.
No, we don't know, but we will know at the start of next week. And the reason why that is because the process of electing a new Conservative Party leader is decided by that oh-so-famous 1922 committee. And they can't decide how they're going to run the contest yet because they themselves are in the middle of elections. They elect their new executive on Monday, and after that point, they will meet and set out the rules, set out the terms, set out the thresholds even, for those candidates who wish to stand to become Tory party leader. However, we do have a rough idea of how it will take place. If we take last time round, only 3 years ago, of course, as guidance, what happened then was 10 Conservative MPs were needed in order to nominate a candidate, and then those candidates would go forward every Tuesday, every Thursday, be voted upon one by one, being whittled down to a final 2. That's votes amongst Tory MPs, of course, and those final 2 then go out to the country at large, the Conservative Party membership in the country at large, I should say, around 150,000 people, we think, who then vote between those 2 final candidates. I have to say there's some speculation from some members of the 1922 committee that the threshold for nominating candidates this time might be raised. It might be a slightly higher bar. It might be, instead of 10 MPs, 20 MPs to nominate a candidate to get them onto that initial ballot for those MP rounds before the process whittles down even further. And that may well be why some of the perhaps less well-established candidates, those who haven't been in the cabinet, for example, Tom Tugendhat, it might well be why they're announcing now And the bigger beasts, those who are currently in the Cabinet or those who have recently been in the Cabinet, may feel it's safe to wait a little bit longer before they announce, because they probably have a larger base of support. There's a bit of a game going on here, and you can see why some candidates are declaring earlier and others are waiting until the process officially starts.
OK, Tom, for now, thank you. We're going to catch up with you a little bit later on.
Yes, but we're still discussing it, so let's speak to former Conservative Party MP and former political correspondent for The Independent, Michael Brown.
Morning, Anne. Morning,
Hello.
Steve.
Hello.
Morning. Here we go again.
My goodness,
Yes.
exactly, yes. And isn't it remarkable what's happened in the last 48 hours? A lot of the feedback coming through to us is sort of saying how revolted they are by the whole process.
Yes, and this takes me back 32 years when I was in the position of involvement with the Thatcher to Major election. I was a die-hard Margaret Thatcher supporter. I took the view that Margaret Thatcher had, like Boris, delivered a fantastic election victory in 1987, and then 3 years later, there we were chucking, well, not me, but there we were chucking her out in very similar circumstances to the way Boris has been chucked out. And the voters of my constituency and all over the country were in love with Margaret Thatcher, as there are many Conservative supporters who voted for Boris. So I can understand the sense of outrage. And I've maintained to both of you on previous programmes, and that it's very, very hard when a Prime Minister has to go, not because of the decision of the voters, but because of an internal coup inside the Conservative Party. But we are where we are. We have been here, in my case, 32 years ago, and it's almost a repeat.
Are they, as someone emailed in, said, rats leaving a sinking ship that they've scuppered themselves?
No, I think that's a bit harsh. At the end of the day, if you, as Prime Minister, cannot command the support of your Cabinet and cannot command the support of your backbench colleagues, you cannot continue, notwithstanding what you did in the previous general election. And that is why Margaret Thatcher took the decision, I wouldn't say voluntarily, but she saw the writing on the wall and she did not seek... She made the decision to interview each one of her cabinet ministers, and they virtually unanimously said, Prime Minister, the game is up. And it looks more or less as though a similar kind of thing has happened this time round. The difference is, of course, Margaret Thatcher actually won the leadership ballot against Michael Heseltine, but in those days you had to have a threshold margin, which she failed to do. So the similarities are eerily familiar with somebody as old as me.
But is that what makes the Tories sharper than the other lot, in a way? Because I know the leadership process that takes place in the Labour Party is unbelievably long-winded, isn't it? And you often end up with the candidate who actually was the least popular.
Yes, the main difference between the Conservative Party and the Labour Party is that it is much more difficult to get rid of a Labour leader
yes, which is why we don't see it so often.
We don't see it so often. The Conservative Party...
So is that a good thing?
I don't know. I should just tell you that every single year before 1990, there was an annual election for the leader of the Conservative Party. It's just that there was only ever one candidate. And the chairman of the 1922 committee would say to us all, once a year after the state opening of Parliament, nominations will be open for the leader of the parliamentary party. They will open this week and they'll close next week. And then the following week at the 1922 committee, throughout the 1990s, the 1980s, he would say, now there's just one nomination for leader of the parliamentary party for this year. It's Margaret Thatcher.
Yes, I see.
And that's how it worked. But it's all changed since.
You were on the 22 committee there.
I wasn't on it, but I was a member of it. Every backbench member of Parliament is a member of the 1922 committee, but not on the executive.
But all eyes are on them now. They are in charge now of what happens next.
And what will happen, basically, the House of Commons rises for the summer recess 2 weeks today. By 2 weeks today, we will have the last two. And all this business about Boris...
Reckon?
We will. We have to, because they're all going to the beaches for August.
Well,
the ballot has to take place in the House of Commons.
If Graham's going to have... Sir Graham Brady's going to have... doesn't sound so familiar, must I? If Sir Graham Brady is going to have the last two...
Yes, he will.
By 2 weeks today, then there is no reason why we can't get...
There will be a new Prime Minister the week beginning the 5th of September, because Graham Brady has done this... This is his third time.
Why not?
No, you can't.
Why?
You can't, because the association members up and down the land have to go through the physical postal voting business.
Yeah, but that doesn't take that long.
They have to, well, it can be done during August. The House of Commons will not be sitting. All this business that Boris is going to use the national credit card to sort of spend money that doesn't exist is nonsense. We will have a new Prime Minister by the first week of September. That is a mere less than 2 months, 9 weeks to go. This is
it's a
nonsense.
Look, we've been here twice before.
We've been here twice before. Cameron to May, May to Boris. It was all done within about 6 weeks. You have to allow time for the membership to have the hustings round the country. People like Ian Dale will be conducting the hustings in regional centres.
So it's every member of the Conservative Party?
Every paid-up member of the Conservative Party in the land that has been a member for at least 3 months has to have a ballot paper to vote for one of the last two. It will be done and dusted. There will be a new Prime Minister by the first week of September. Boris... And the day after the new leader has been elected, Boris will go to the Queen, exactly like Theresa May did, exactly like David Cameron did, to tender their resignation and recommend to the Queen that the new leader of the Conservative Party succeed in about 15 minutes' time. The car goes in one entrance and the other one comes out the other entrance. So all this nonsense that Boris is going to cling on until October or November is for the birds. It's rubbish. Right. But she has to have a Prime Minister, and one Prime Minister only. There is no such thing in our unwritten constitution for a temporary Prime Minister. Boris will stay there, constrained by his cabinet, constrained by the fact that the House of Commons will be shut for the summer recess, so no legislation can be passed during that time. We'll have two candidates known to us by Friday, the 22nd of July. And during the course of...
But the only thing is that during that period, we do need to have a functioning government, don't we? And we lost so many ministers, you wonder whether Boris can prove to anyone that he has a functioning government.
We don't need all these parliamentary private secretaries. I don't count them as ministers. They're just bag carriers. They're not even paid a salary. The House of Commons isn't sitting in August, so you're not going to have bill committees requiring ministers of state to take bills through. So there's not a problem.
But you need your major ministers of state.
And he's got a full cabinet. Yeah. There is a full cabinet there. There is not going to be there probably won't be cabinet meetings very much during August because they're all beyond the
emergency. There are people who can take.
Of course, yes. There is a precedent. When David Cameron resigned, that was going to be a long period, if you remember, but it was truncated because Andrea Leadsom withdrew from the final two and Theresa May was left standing, so there was no membership ballot on that occasion. There was last time round. But we'll have a new Prime Minister by the week beginning the 5th of September. I'm convinced that Graham Brady is so experienced, he's doing it for the third time. He knows that there is pressure to get it done and dusted quickly. And Boris will stay there. He's not going to be allowed to spend money that the country hasn't got. Not going to be able to press the red button against Putin.
It's not the experience of Graham, is it? It's the experience of the people in his office who have to run it, I think.
Well, Graham Brady is a very steady pair of hands. He'll sort it. It will be sorted very, very speedily and very, very efficiently.
OK, look, Michael, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Don't go anywhere. We've got all the sport with Paul in a couple of minutes.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory,
twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GBNews.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
7:29. Paul Coyte's here. Morning.
Good morning. Well, this politics has been getting in the way of Wimbledon, hasn't it?
I quite frankly, I agree. It's been getting in the way of a lot of good tennis.
Yeah.
It's a huge day today.
It is.
It is a very big day today. Although we should mention, really, before we get to Cameron Norrie, is that Rafa Nadal is not going to be playing in the semi-final, which I think is so unfortunate.
Well, because it means Kyrgios is through automatically.
Kyrgios
He's
is
the bad boy of tennis.
He does it. He gets through on a bye.
But I was hoping Rafa would win Wimbledon this year, and it's just another injury, isn't it? Abdominal injury.
It's a tear. I don't even know how this works out. It just sounds very painful. I think it's like a 8mm tear in the abdomen, so there's an actual rip in there. And so, he looks like he's swinging quite nicely there, but apparently it's the serve.
You can imagine his doctors say the only way to solve that problem is rest.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's tear inside.
It's very hard when you have rock-hard abs like us.
Do you find that problem as well?
Yeah.
Must be very difficult.
Just sit uncomfortably, all of a sudden there's another rip.
Why don't you take his place?
Well, the thing is that you would think that maybe Taylor Fritz, who he lost to, or actually he beat, may be able to replace him. But as far as the rules go in Wimbledon, it's not the case. So then you've got Nick Kyrgios, the bad boy. He's got a little more rest, and he'll be ready for the final against whoever that is.
I bet he can't believe his luck.
I know. I bet he can't believe his luck as well.
Who's he playing?
Well, the thing is, it's all going to be about it's all about our boy, isn't it?
Well, Cameron Norrie playing
Cameron Norrie
Novak
against Novak Djokovic. And
this afternoon.
I would love to see Cameron Norrie. And wouldn't it be great if Cam can actually come through and win this?
But it's a big ask.
It's a huge ask.
Although Novak had problems the other day, didn't he?
Well, he did,
He
but
was 2 sets down to start with. I couldn't believe it.
But that shows what great champion he is, and it also shows about Nadal as well, is that even though they're 2 sets down, it's that will to win, which is just unbelievable. But Cam is also that similar sort of player. He can grind results out, and he's a terrific tennis player.
It could be his year.
Oh, God, you know what? Were you touching wood as you said that? This is every time I think that, I'm trying to do
Formica.
Exactly, always
Wood
touch
in there
Formica
somewhere.
under the circumstances. So anyway, that's the semi-final. Whoever gets through will then play, of course, Nick Kyrgios in the final on Sunday. And also, we should mention the women as well. This is the interesting one, is Elena Rybakina. Now, she is from Kazakhstan. Although I say she represents Kazakhstan, she's actually from Russia. So she was born in Moscow. She then became a Kazakhstan player 4 years ago because of the backing that they gave her. She's going to be playing Ons Jabeur in the final. But the thing is, it's everything that Wimbledon didn't want. Can you imagine if she wins? The whole point of them banning any Russians and Belarusians is they're thinking that how Russia would then respond to it, and if a Russian would win. So if she goes on and wins,
even though she's playing on is she playing for Kazakhstan? You don't play for a country in Wimbledon.
You don't, but I mean, she's under the Kazakhstan flag.
Yeah.
So she now plays, if you are playing for a country, for Kazakhstan.
Well,
but I imagine Putin
didn't look very clearly at that, did they?
Well, yeah, Putin is going to look at that and then think, well, she's Russian, but she's keeping well out of the way of that. But, I mean, it's just the irony of that everybody that's actually been banned, and then it's someone that's born in Russia that could come through and actually win the Wimbledon title.
It's only like us saying Cameron Norrie's English, isn't it?
It probably is, because, I think we're just being, we're saying he's English.
I heard him on the radio this morning when I was driving in, and he sounded extremely Australian.
It was sort of New Zealand. It was that fish and chips thing going on there. It was either New Zealand, and they lived in South Africa. But I'm quite happy to call, and I think Scottish parents, but I'm very happy to call him totally British, aren't
Absolutely.
you? I think so. He's representing us, so it works for that. So therefore,
Greg Rosetsky, where was it? Was he Canadian?
It was Canadian.
Yes.
Number
But
one
he was
player for
British.
a
But he
while,
was the
wasn't
British. But he was the British number one. Of
Yes,
course he
that's
was.
right.
Yeah,
There
yeah,
you
yeah.
go.
You take what you can when it comes
Well,
to
you
tests.
do.
There's not many of them knocking around, so we take what we can.
Quite right. OK, Paul,
We
we've
wish
got
you
to leave
well.
it there. We'll see you next week.
Look forward to it.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul. OK, we've got all the headlines making today's papers for you in a couple of minutes. Don't go anywhere.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital, absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne. Good morning to you. Emily in Shropshire says, "Smile, Stephen. You look so serious today."
Oh.
That's well, it's a bit of a serious news day. But she also goes on to say, "Larry the cat for Prime Minister."
Yeah.
Well, you can't go wrong there. His mousing policies are excellent.
It was very funny while all of these very serious reporters were outside number 10 Downing Street, sort of speaking of camera, blah, 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 blah. And then the front door opened and they all went, and then out came the cat. And just stood there on the step.
There's a lot to be said for Larry, or any cat to
There
run
must
the
be a
place.
policeman just inside that door who opens and closes the door for the cat.
Quite right, too.
But why don't they have a cat flap? I thought. And then I
every
thought, I
cat
suppose that would be a
deserves.
security problem, a cat flap,
Yes,
wouldn't
my
it?
mother said to me the other day, "Why is the Downing Street door so shiny?" It's like it's made of metal.
Yes, that's right. True.
Not that they're painting it every other weekend. Anyway, look, the race is on, as you know, for to the leader of the Conservative Party after the PM resigned as party leader. He will remain as Prime Minister, though, until a successor is found. But the fallout, of course, continues.
So let's cross live now to Nick Thomas-Symonds, who's Shadow Secretary of State for International Trade. And a very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us. Your thoughts on the last 48 hours, if you please.
Well, firstly, very good morning and good to join you. I think what we've finally seen over the past 48 hours are Conservative MPs finding some sort of conscience, at least some of them have done, but they've actually enabled Boris Johnson, they've propped up Boris Johnson. Even now, they are allowing Boris Johnson to remain in office. And at a time of a cost of living crisis, we're going to have this zombie government. We don't know how long we're going to have that zombie government, probably until Monday when a timetable is going to be set out. But frankly, the country cannot wait for this. What we should actually be having is a fresh start, a change of government after this 12 years of Conservative failure.
Hold on. And look, there may be people watching who say, yeah, you've got a fair point, but you're playing politics with this, aren't you? In the sense that as Michael Brown was just telling us, there's very likely to be a new Prime Minister in place by the first week of September, the last week of August, perhaps. If as they did, as you're suggesting, which is call a general election, it's going to take longer than that for it all to happen.
No, it wouldn't take longer than that. And we don't even know at the moment that that is the timetable for the succession. And we are literally left now with a government, with a Prime Minister who's unfit for office, but it seems the Conservatives are willing to leave him there. And secondly, we are now going to have what looks like a possibly long drawn out contest. What this shows, by the way, is that changing the person at the top is not going to change the fundamental issue for the Conservative Party, which is this 12 years of failure. And there's no point it's somehow trying to distance themselves from Boris Johnson. They made Boris Johnson possible. They've made the last months of trashing of standards in public life, the lying and the chaos all possible. And whoever is at the top of the Conservative Party is not going to change that.
Nevertheless, in the last general election, the Tories won with a very large majority, which I accept has dwindled slightly, but still a large majority. There's a functioning government there. Why the heck would they want to call a general election? They're simply not going to. They can keep going with what they want. Quite soon will be a new leader.
Well, we live in a parliamentary democracy. That is absolutely true. But is it in the interests of the country to have this zombie government? As you rightly point out, they won a majority of 80, but they've still managed to get themselves through their own chaos into a situation where they've got a non-functioning government. Why on earth should people trust them ever to run government competently again after this? That is why we need that fresh start, that mandate from the public for a new government to tackle the cost of living crisis before us.
No one's going to buy into that, especially, I mean, forgive me for being absolutely direct, but when you use phrases like zombie government, which I presume is something an advisor has said this would be a good message to get across, and you're probably using in all your interviews this morning, people don't buy into that. People aren't going to be fooled into thinking it's a zombie government. This is what happens when there's a change of leader in these circumstances. As we've seen, the current leader stays in place until someone new is brought in. It's going to happen in about 6 weeks during recess. So, I mean, you're just spinning a line to the country there, aren't you?
No, I'm a political historian, amongst other things, Stephen. And I think the phrase and the word zombie government is pretty well known as a phrase when you have a government that isn't going to be functioning properly. And we've also heard in the media that the Prime Minister himself is actually supposed to have said to the Cabinet that there won't be any major policy initiatives. So don't just take my word for it. That is the position that Boris Johnson has again, together with Conservative MPs, chosen. That's the position they've chosen to put the country in. And the situation is, you can't have a situation where on the one hand you have the Conservative Party saying you have someone who's completely unfit for office, and then leaving him there any day, let alone weeks that he remains in office, is too long.
But as Stephen said earlier, even if you got what you wanted now, which was the calling of a general election, the country would still be with that same government, that same Prime Minister in situ until the result of a general election. And it would be no sooner, and it would take far longer than just waiting for the Tories to have their election, to put in place another leader and let them get on with the job.
Well, who knows? They might actually get rid of Boris Johnson, do what they should be doing more quickly in that scenario. But in any event, what you get with a general election is a government with a new mandate and a government with momentum to actually act. I speak to people on a regular basis about the pressures in cost of living that they are facing. They can't just wait around. If some media reports are to be believed today, it is because the Prime Minister wants to have some sort of wedding party at Chequers. I mean, can you honestly believe that that is the case after the behaviour of recent months? And it seems once again the Prime Minister putting his own interests above those of the country.
OK, Nick Thomas-Simmons, it's good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, what do you make of that? gbviews@gbnews.uk. Let's see what Benedict Spence and Ella Whelan make of all of that. They're here to go through our papers this morning. The party is over, says the Mirror, Benedict. I mean, admittedly, it's a fair headline in a sense.
The word party will haunt Boris Johnson, won't it?
It will. And this is, of course, the story was alluded to just then, that the Prime Minister, one of the reasons the Prime Minister wants to hang on a little bit longer is that he and his wife are planning to have a big celebration of their wedding at Chequers, the Prime Minister's official country residence, that they weren't able to do, obviously, previously, because they had quite a small ceremony. They had it done quite quickly. I think, whilst this isn't confirmed, as far as I know, this is just a story that's going around. We're not sure if it's the case yet. It continues to feed into the narrative, doesn't it? That, for whatever you might think about Boris Johnson, there is always an element of almost sort of flippancy about the way that he's conducted his life whilst in office. We all heard, didn't we, the jokes about the wallpaper in Number 10, but of course all of these lines come from the fact that a lot of the scandals that have brought him down are acutely personal, and they're to do with actually how he conducts his private life. Very little to do actually with policy. And I think many people had said from the beginning that he's not a serious person, or as serious a person as he should be, that he sees being Prime Minister almost just as like having a title, almost the idea of being Prime Minister was what was important to him. And again, it just feeds into this image of a man who is playing at politics, who has not taken the role perhaps as seriously as he could have done, and that is what's led to his downfall, by not actually being as rigorous, as upholding the standards in public office. And I do wonder, the word party might come to haunt him. I do think maybe he will look back on this and say, well, actually, I could have taken things a little bit more seriously. I had a huge mandate, I had a huge opportunity to do great things, and I squandered a lot of it.
But how much of this is real? Because, as you said, there's all this focus on, well, he wants to use Chequers for a celebration. Well, maybe that's right, maybe it isn't. But there's no precedent for him to walk away, as the Labour Party says. Well, he should walk away now because it's a zombie government. Well, except if he did walk away now, which would be fairly unprecedented, then there'd be a caretaker Prime Minister in, which isn't really constitutional, and then they would say it's an unelected interim leader, and therefore it's a zombie government.
Of course, that's all just playing politics. I think some of this stems from the fear that was being promoted by Dominic Cummings, actually, on Twitter. It never wanted to sort of let anything lie, saying that if you leave him in place, as the man sort of overseeing things whilst there's a contest, he will believe that there's a way back. I don't know quite how he'd be able to see that there's a way back, but we also heard that from other people who were doing on the airwaves yesterday. Alistair Campbell, for example, was very keen that Boris Johnson should be turfed out as quickly as possible because there might be some plot to hold on, a la Donald Trump. I think it is all quite overblown. I think it's a bit hysterical. I really do just think it's the case of Boris Johnson being quite an indolent person, just in general, and actually not taking things quite as seriously as he could have done. But I don't think for a second, actually, that he genuinely believes at this moment in time, with the square root of nothing to support him in cabinet or in his party, I don't think he genuinely believes that there's a way that he could keep on going.
No, in fact, one of the newspaper columnists, I think, is having a joke saying that actually Carrie is steaming the wallpaper off the wall. She's going to take it with her.
I would.
How much in this whole soap opera is Carrie involved?
Well, it's an interesting one because there has been this debate about whether or not Carrie's involvement, whether talking about Carrie's involvement makes you kind of a sexist. You're saying it's not really his fault, it's his wife's fault. And there's been a bit of that around, but we know that, she had, as the Eye reports it, played her own role in the Number 10 soap opera that, unfortunately, and they quote an invoice that was seen by The Independent, some of the details that come out, a drinks trolley that they bought costing £3,675. In fact, the cheapest item on that invoice was a 500 quid tablecloth. I'd be wearing the tablecloth if it cost me 500 quid. So, that kind of thing, you do think, like Benedict says, what on earth was going on? And, the kind of, I think the arrogance of thinking that this stuff would never get out tells you something about those two individuals. And obviously there's, they quote the ABBA party that allegedly happened in Number 10 and all those kind of gaffes and scandals. But I think the thing that I want to highlight about Carrie was that we were at one point talking, there was there was a kind of nickname for her as Carrie Antoinette that lots of people did dismiss as sort of sexist. But there was a significant thing about her playing a political role, something like the kind of Dominic Cummings role, which was she was whispering in the Prime Minister's ear, as, you know, as wives and husbands do, but that there was significant moves in relation to, you know, what happened with the Afghanistan withdrawal, with the whole fury over, you know, taking animals instead of people on that escape mission, that there have been moves in relation to some of her pet projects around climate change or animals' rights and all that kind of thing. And that for me is the bigger problem, which is that if you have somebody who is unelected, having that much of a role in the serious issue of politics, never mind blowing loads of money on wallpaper and things like that, that I think is to me the more serious problem. And the key thing to say about that is it says a lot about Boris Johnson, because as much as he put himself forward as this man of principle, as someone who was going to shake things up, time and time again he proved himself to be somebody who parroted what the last person said in his ear, whether that was Dominic Cummings or some other advisor or indeed his wife. And I think that's probably part of the reason. Never mind, you know, they quote here in the eye, the Mustique trip, Barnard Castle, the Chris Pincher thing, all of that plays a role. But I think fundamentally it has been that he's proven himself to be unprincipled.
OK. Look, we've got to leave it there. We are so tight for time today, but thank you. We'll catch up with you a little bit later on, Benedict and Ella. Let's talk to one of our viewers and listeners, Alan, who's in Grimsby for us this morning. Alan, good to see you. How are you? What do you make of all of this?
Good, thank you. Morning, Stephen and Anne.
Morning. Yeah, go on. What do you make of all of this? What are your thoughts about Boris and who should succeed him?
Well, the whole thing's a complete fiasco. You would think you were watching some kind of comedy. This whole thing about Pincher, I mean, what absolute nonsense. It's nothing to do with Johnson. Pincher would have been at the Carlton Club, whether he was whatever his role in government was, because he's been an MP for about 12 years. So to try and sort of bring down a Prime Minister over the misbehaving of somebody else seems to me to be absolutely ridiculous. I really think that the political classes have lost their mind.
I suppose the argument with the Chris Pincher issue is that it was the straw that broke the camel's back in a way, and the fact that whatever the ins and outs of what went on, that Boris Johnson said, no, I didn't know anything about what had happened before, and then has had to retrack it and say, oh, well, I'd forgotten about that. I'd forgotten about it. And it's that lack of... the lack of transparency, I guess.
I see what they're trying to say, but if I was to ask you, Stephen, what were you doing on the 8th of July 2019? And do you remember the conversations that you had on that day? Could you tell me here and now that you would actually remember that? Or would you have to go and look it up in your diary or go and check on it? Because the chances are that he didn't actually remember speaking to the man or even being told about him. If you think about the amount of information that must cross the Prime Minister's desk, hourly, daily, weekly, something that had been dealt with in the Foreign Office, he may have been informed about, and you would just think, OK, that's dealt with, I'll forget about that. It's not important, I've got other things to do. So I think the whole shift of the Labour Party, you know, trying to say, you put this predator in amongst us all, it's just so much absolute nonsense.
So do you think he should not have gone? Do you think he should somehow have stuck it out?
Well, I think what you have is you have quite a lot of people in the Conservative Party who were already against him because of the vote of confidence. So there was anything at all that they could latch onto was the next thing to try to drive him out. And then you've got all the Conservative MPs jumping off the cliff like a bunch of lemmings, as opposed to staying and doing the job that they were put in place to do and paid to do. I just think it's absolutely ridiculous.
Do you think he should hang on in there until a new leader is elected, or they should put in some sort of a caretaker?
I don't see any reason why he shouldn't stay. That seems to be what the norm is. An outgoing Prime Minister stays in place until the incoming Prime Minister comes in. And that's the way that the system appears to have always worked, as far as I'm aware. So I don't see there's any reason why he shouldn't be there. Parliament's going into recess within a couple of weeks. There won't be any government business done. There'll be a cabinet in place if anything dramatic happens. I don't see really what the issue is. It's really about the personal dislike that people have for Boris to keep this, perpetuate this and keep it going and going and going.
Look, Alan, really good to talk to you this morning. We're out of time, but it's really good to get your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. There you are. You see, we speak to our viewers. And if you want to get in touch, do remember, it's gbviews@gbnews.uk. We love to have your views anyway, and we often read them out, as you know, but just occasionally we get back in touch with you.
We do. We do. It's time now for On Your Doorstep. Now, let's see where Anna Riley is for us this morning. Morning, Anna.
Good morning, Stephen and Anne. I am in sunny Bridlington and here at the harbour front. You can see the beautiful beach, the cliffs behind me. It is a seaside town. It's well known for that, and it's also known as the lobster capital of Europe. There's 300 tonnes of lobster that are landed here every year. And as part of this feature, we do normally knock on someone's door, but we did want to show you the view. I am joined by my guest, though, a resident in Bridlington. Just introduce yourself for us.
My name is Thomas, and I own and operate a hotel here on the seaside of Bridlington. And I'm new in town, yes, and I just see the potential of Bridlington as a new capital of lobster for Europe. So I thought, it would be an interesting adventure.
And tell me a little bit about your background.
I was born in Asia. Right, educated in Europe, and traveled to the US, worked and educated in the US. And last 20 years I've spent my time in Europe, and now I'm in the UK. I'm thinking of doing something that's going to be good for my businesses of investing in the hotel business.
That's it, so come to invest in business here. So what we've been talking about this morning is Boris Johnson standing down as Prime Minister. What's your sort of take on it, knowing international politics?
Well, his time has come to let someone else take the lead for the UK. I believe the UK has to look to its future as a global player. That means attracting talents, but also money and workforce. And it has to make the right policies for people to want to come to the UK to work, to invest, and to make it a nice place to live.
Thank you so much, Thomas. And Bridlington is certainly a nice place to live and to visit, as you can see, Stephen and Anne.
Oh, it looks absolutely gorgeous.
Beautiful.
Thank you very much indeed.
Why is it we so much love to see the sea?
I don't know, isn't it funny?
Yeah, something. It's just energising, isn't it, seeing the sea?
And just that smell, salt in the air and all that. Oh, I love it.
And the rising warmth. Oh,
and a bag of chips.
Oh, yes.
That's the way.
Do let us know where you're watching us from and whether you can see the sea where you are.
gbviews@gbnews.uk. Top stories heading your way in just a moment.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to Friday's forecast. Plenty of sunshine to come across the UK today. However, we could see some thicker cloud, patchy light rain across the far northwest. And the reason for this is a weak weather front sits across parts of Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, under this big area of high pressure. So most places will be dry and settled, but just a little bit more cloud for one or two of us. First thing Friday morning, the best of the sunshine across eastern and southern England. Thicker cloud across parts of Wales, the West Midlands, northwest England will disperse as the morning goes on. However, across Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, bit of a grey morning here, the risk of some light rain and drizzle. But this weather front just slowly pushes a little bit further south through the afternoon, allowing it to brighten up across Scotland. Temperatures across the board, 20 to 25 Celsius, but in the southeast, 28, possibly 29 degrees. So a warm evening to come across much of the UK. Plenty of sunshine ahead of dusk across England and Wales. Thicker cloud pushing from Northern Ireland into northwest England, North Wales. Perhaps the odd spot of drizzle, but many places dry during the early hours into Saturday morning. Just one or two showers across Scotland, but overall another mild night. Temperatures 13 to 15 Celsius to start Saturday morning, but plenty of dry weather, plenty of sunshine to get going. A bit more cloud across western areas, but this dispersing as the morning goes on. Blue skies for many as we move through the day. However, another weak weather front will move into parts of Northern Ireland, western Scotland, perhaps thick enough for a bit of drizzle, but elsewhere, Lots of sunshine, high UV levels and high temperatures as well, 27 Celsius towards the southeast. And this continues over the next few days. Plenty of sunshine, lots of dry weather and temperatures rising further. We could see the high 20s by Sunday and even up to 30 or 31 as we head towards Monday.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation. We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We're trying to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
The race to find a new Conservative Party leader begins following Boris Johnson's resignation.
Good morning. It's 8 o'clock on Friday, the 8th of July. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Anne.
We're live across the whole of the UK. We're on your TV, your radio and online. So wherever you are, you can take us out and about with you today. This is what you're waking up to.
Boris Johnson will be out of number 10 by October, staying on until a successor is found. In a speech outside Downing Street, he thanked the British public for their support and reiterated the government's commitment both to supporting Ukraine and levelling up the UK.
The timetable for the leadership election is going to be set out next week. Early favourites include the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace, former Chancellor Rishi Sunak and Penny Mordaunt, who's currently a Trade Minister.
So what do you think? As ever, you can join in any of our discussions by emailing us, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet us at gbnews.
And if you want to watch us online, stay up to date by subscribing to the GB News YouTube channel. It's free, and we're less than 1,000 people away from 500,000 subscribers. We'd love to just break through that line this morning.
And we love to hear from you. Don't forget to get in touch with us. Tell us where you're watching us from, actually. And we were waxing lyrical about those lovely shots just a few minutes ago of Bridlington and the seaside there. Of course, it's a very well-known seaside town. But if you can see the sea this morning, send us a photograph, will you? Love to see it.
Be nice. And talking of pictures, if you're on the radio, you have to imagine this one. But Lee's been in touch. Morning to you, Lee. And he sent us this one through. So my little one is starting the morning right. Here he is with my GB News mug, stealing the last of my coffee. He's ready, like I am, for another turbulent political news day. We love you, GB News.
Now, how did you get a GB News mug?
Oh, from the shop.
Are we selling
The
them?
shop's up and running now.
I didn't know that.
Yes. I sent my friend Luke one the other day.
Oh, brilliant. What else are we selling?
Umbrellas, pens, water bottles like these ones we've got over here.
Oh. But mugs.
And also, actually, we need to make a complaint.
What?
Because you can buy breakfast with Eamon and Isabel mugs.
But not breakfast with
Stephen and Anne mugs.
It's not good enough.
I've been meaning to mention that.
We'll have to do something about that, won't we?
I think we will. But they're orange, they're bright orange, and I've never actually seen one in the flesh. They're like our logo. They've got our logo on. But I think these ones are the popular ones because they've got the ones we use on air.
Yeah.
There you go.
Absolutely.
Have this one if it's clean. There you go. No, it's quite good. Yeah, so I've ordered some on
The
there.
shop was up and running, so you find that by going to the website, I presume.
No, I saw it on Twitter.
Oh.
But there you go.
These things are worth knowing, clearly.
They are worth knowing. These are nice.
They are nice mugs. Yeah.
Matt in Essex says, if Larry the Cat leads the Tories, will it be the Conservative Porty?
Oh, dear, oh, dear, oh, dear.
Come on.
Yeah. No, please, send us your photographs of the seaside, not your dad jokes. That's a dad joke, isn't it, really?
That's all right, though. This is interesting. Graham says, although I think Johnson made some mistakes, in my opinion, everything that he was accused of was minor and superficial. All accusations were overblown with a false moral component. The public wouldn't hold politicians to the highest moral standards if they broke speeding laws, even though people die from speeding drivers. Fair point.
It is a difficult one. Pat says, I would like to say that I've been brought to tears to see the inhumanity being shown to Boris and his family. I received a petition on the day of his resignation demanding that he vacate number 10 immediately. Where has this vicious attitude come from? Firstly, Boris is a man with a family. I know he's not exactly in need, but the public attitude is so hard and unfeeling.
And yet, Kim says, Boris resigned, get him out and let the government function. So, Tony says, we are the 5th most successful country in spite of our politicians, not because of them. I don't know.
Yeah, and Eric says, we don't need another charismatic, narcissistic leader who thinks he or she is the party. We need someone with competence, integrity, honesty and common sense.
Well.
So who's your money on?
GB Views at gbnews.uk. We'd love to hear from you. Well, of course, the Prime Minister has resigned as leader of the Conservative Party, saying he fought to remain in power, but he felt it was his duty and he finally had to step down as it was the will of his party.
His decision, of course, follows 3 days of revolt from within his own party that's seen almost 60 MPs, including 5 cabinet ministers, quit.
However, the PM will continue in the role he describes as the best job in the world until that successor is found.
Well, for more, let's turn to GB News' political correspondent, Tom Harwood, who's in Downing Street. Tom, it was a hot night last night, but was there a chill from that door behind you?
It certainly was. I mean, the political weather yesterday almost matched the tumultuous weather that we saw in this street. In the morning, it looked like there was a storm brewing, hints of rain, chilly winds, and then by the evening, by the afternoon, summer sunshine. Really curious weather, matching, of course, the political weather where we saw the most tumultuous turn of fortunes in the day, matching the week. Who would have thought at the start of the week that we would have seen those resignations, particularly those cabinet resignations, and the sheer drop of faith of the Parliamentary Conservative Party in their leader. As the Prime Minister said yesterday, just after midday from a lectern in this very street, when the herd moves, it moves, and that's really what we saw happen this week. It shows the sort of mechanisms of our parliamentary democracy, that no Prime Minister can stay in place without the confidence of their party, without, frankly, the confidence of Parliament. That is our constitutional system, and it has been, frankly, since 1688. So this is really what we are seeing now play out, and it must be said that whilst there is a lot of speculation and indeed some demands from the most embittered opponents of Boris Johnson for him to leave immediately, for him to be evicted from this place and some sort of interim Prime Minister take the office until a new one can be found. It has to be said, this has never happened before in our history, and I do think that the calls for that to happen have been subsiding somewhat as the heat of the moment has been subsiding. Really what we're going to see now is a process that matches much what happened in the wake of of the resignation of Theresa May and indeed in the wake of the resignation of David Cameron. Several weeks of leadership contest and by the autumn, a new Prime Minister entering the building behind me.
OK, Tom, thank you. Well, let's talk to former Conservative MP Michael Brown and Associate Editor of the Daily Mirror, Kevin Maguire, who joins us from Tyneside, I think. A morning to you both. Kevin, let's start with you. I was reading some of your comments in the paper this morning. I mean, a little bit vitriolic, don't you think? I mean, a lot of people who are getting in touch with us this morning are just finding that this has been such a nasty business, it's turning them off politics altogether.
Yeah, I think there are two types of people. There are those who respect Boris Johnson and those who know him and deal with him and know that he is an absolute charlatan. He's a liar, he's debased standards in public life, he had no integrity. That speech, I thought, yesterday was an utter disgrace because it was all, the herd have moved against me, this is really wrong, I've done nothing wrong myself, no contrition. I understand why some people, if they're his supporters and they will have a little bit of human sympathy for him, that's understandable. But the fact is that those in the Conservative Party who were led by him to an 80-seat majority, those who have to deal with him day in, day out, week in, week out, they turned on him because they knew they'd made a pact with the devil and they've got to take some responsibility for that. But the devil was completely out of control and it was just a lie and a scandal too far. And he did go out, not with a bang, but a pincher, because they revolted over him putting in charge of them somebody who was considered to be a predator.
He's gone now. The question is, I suppose, when he will actually move, the removal van will actually turn up to 10 Downing Street. What do you think should happen next in the next few weeks? Only probably 6 or 8 weeks before we have another Conservative leader who will simply walk into number 10. What do you think Boris should do in the meantime?
Yeah, I think, and hopefully the 1922 committee of Tory MPs will give us a short 6-week campaign rather than a long 3-month campaign when they meet on Monday. It's quite normal, it's got to be said, for a Prime Minister to stay on as a caretaker, not normally appointing a virtually new cabinet as he had to yesterday. But I think the circumstances of his departure, the fact he had to be dragged kicking and screaming, that, as he described himself, he was a bit like a Japanese soldier left over after the end of the war who didn't realise it was over. I could see the case. I genuinely see the case for him going out early and Dominic Raab, the Deputy Prime Minister, who said he won't stand in the Tory leadership contest, taken over as the caretaker. I think that might be better. I also understand why it's complicated when Boris Johnson has a big party bash organised in Chequers at the end of this month for celebrate his wedding, and that he'd have to pay and book for his own venue if he's not Prime Minister, so he may want to hang on for that. But I do think, given the circumstances of his departure and the fact that he didn't see the writing on the wall and he became so vindictive, sacking Michael Gove and others, I understand why quite a few Tory MPs think he should be out immediately and put in a caretaker.
Michael, what do you make of it? What do you make of what Kevin's saying?
Well, I think Kevin is absolutely right when he says that it's going to be a very, very truncated leadership election. I suspect that by the 21st of July, 2 weeks from today, we will know the top two who are going out to the Tory membership. Look, Parliament is going into recess on the 21st of July. It comes back on the 5th of September. There is no way Boris Johnson can get any fancy legislation through against the wishes of Parliament or the Conservative Party. I'm quite relaxed about the fact that constitutionally you have to have only one Prime Minister at a time. And the problem with the idea of a temporary Prime Minister is that Boris would have to go now to Buckingham Palace, tender his resignation, recommend Dominic Raab be a Prime Minister for 6 weeks, and then Dominic Raab's got to go and relinquish the seals of office 6 weeks later to hand over to another. And I think you're putting Buckingham Palace in a terrible position if you do that. I am satisfied that, notwithstanding the suggestion by some Tory MPs that Boris might go deluded and try and wreck the country and spend on the national credit card or press the red button against Putin or whatever, I think that there are enough constraints to ensure that the parallel of Cameron to May, May to Boris will be followed as quickly as possible. Dear old Sir Graham Brady is now on his third leadership election. He's very effective at understanding what needs to be done speedily, and I'm sure that will happen.
Nevertheless, even the Tory newspapers are asking the question, what on earth have these Tories done to us? And if you look at the front page of the Daily Mail, that is in the great big front page headline. What the hell have they done?
Now, Anne.
Michael.
That takes me back 32 years to November 1990, and there is the Daily Express with virtually the same headline, and the circumstances of the defenestration of Boris is very similar to that of Margaret Thatcher.
It's the front page of the Daily Express. You've brought a photocopy.
The difference is, and here is where I agree with Kevin, Margaret Thatcher, she saw the light. Immediately, she recognised that having interviewed each one of her cabinet ministers, she'd lost the confidence of her cabinet, even though she still retained a majority of Tory MPs. She, unlike Boris, finally was able to see the light without fighting the inevitable. That's the big difference.
Kevin, we just talked. We spoke to Nick Thomas-Symonds in the last hour, going on about effectively wanting a general election to be called, a snap general election. Why is the Labour Party pushing this when they absolutely know, there's not a hope in hell of it happening?
Yeah, well, I think oppositions always demand general elections. That's one of your jobs. I think they know they would win it. They want the Conservative Party to say it doesn't have it, because then it will look weak. And there is a plan to move a vote of no confidence if Boris Johnson doesn't step down immediately rather than hanging on in this interim period. And I think it's quite smart politics for two reasons. One is, if you get a general election, that would be to Labour's advantage at the moment. Personally, I think we should have built into the system, if a governing party changes leaders, prime ministers, there should be an automatic general election after 3 or 6 months. That doesn't happen now, so they can make the change and still go on to May 2024. But the other reason you move that vote of no confidence, demanding the general election, is all these Conservative MPs and ministers who quit and those who publicly demanded Boris Johnson's defenestration and be kicked out of Downing Street and replaced, people who supported him in the past, but they now want him out because the Tory party is ruthless about power, and they see they were going down with him. They don't want to be on the Titanic with a skipper when it hits the iceberg. What they do is they bind those MPs to Boris Johnson. So in the House of Commons, Labour moves a no confidence vote. They will have to vote against it. They will have to then vote with Boris Johnson against a general election. So Labour lash the rats leaving the sinking ship to the skipper that they've just decided to throw overboard.
OK, look, we're out of time. Kevin, Michael, thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.
Thank you. I know, Michael, you wanted to dive in, but I'm being yelled at, so you can't do it.
Yes, afraid so. Can we bring you up to date with the headlines right now, then? The Japanese government says its former prime minister is in a grave condition after being shot at a campaign event. A Japanese broadcaster has said Shinzo Abe appeared to have been shot from behind when he was giving a speech in the city of Nara. The current prime minister says he condemns the act in the strongest of terms.
Ghislaine Maxwell has officially appealed against both her sex trafficking sentence and conviction. Documents show her appeal has been sent to the US Court of Appeals. The British socialite found guilty by a jury of luring young girls to the financier Jeffrey Epstein for him to sexually abuse between 1994 and 2004. She was sentenced to 20 years in prison at a court in New York last month.
And around 240,000 state pensioners, mostly women, have been underpaid, a total of almost £1.5 billion. The problem dates back to 1985 and relates to the old state pension system. They include widows and divorcees who could have been underpaid for years.
And the Ministry of Justice has confirmed the mother of baby P has been released from prison. Tracy Connolly was jailed in 2009 for causing or allowing the death of her 17-month-old son at their home in London. Baby P suffered more than 50 injuries, including fractured ribs and a broken back.
Well, the race to replace Boris Johnson as Conservative Party leader has begun. The Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab, and former Secretary of State for Housing, Michael Gove, well, they've both ruled themselves out.
So who are the main contenders? Who could be the next Prime Minister?
Well, this morning our reporters Ed Crawford and Ellie Costello are out and about in the constituencies of possible contenders. So let's start with you, Ed. Where are you and where's the MP in your area? Who's the MP?
Hi, good morning. I am in Thetford, southwest Norfolk, and this is Liz Truss's constituency. Now, I'm going around today asking people, do they think Liz Truss will make a good PM if she goes for it? Now, one interesting thing about Liz Truss is she has left the ministerial G20 meetings, jumped on an 18-hour flight and come home. Now, this is interesting because Liz has always been very bullish in her support for Ukraine, and it is the first time in recent months where she has had the opportunity, as well as other G20 leaders, to speak to the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, face to face. Perhaps this says more about her prime ministerial ambitions than her ambitions as a foreign secretary.
We shall see. Ed, thank you. Let's go to Ellie Costello then. I know you're in Jeremy Hunt's constituency, aren't you, Ellie? And someone we know quite fancies going into number 10.
Yes, good morning to you, Stephen and Anne, from southwest Surrey. And look, it's like they knew GB News was coming. It's a really beautiful spot here. And yes, as you say, this is Jeremy Hunt's seat. He's held it since 2005, and after that remarkable day yesterday, already questions are starting to be asked about who will replace Boris Johnson, and the Independent newspaper has Jeremy Hunt right at the top as a front runner alongside Tom Tugendhat. So the question is here, does he have the qualities as the next Conservative Party leader? He does have some competition, though. I thought you'd appreciate this. Desmond, 102-year-old Desmond here in Hazelmere, he wants to stand as Prime Minister. Look at this, hashtag Desmond 4pm, hashtag loyal at 102. But Desmond, I don't think you're on the list of Conservative Party leaders, or potential ones at least. But Jeremy Hunt could be in that front-running list, and somebody who knows him very well is Craig McGowan, who is the president of the Hazelmere Chamber of Commerce. So, Craig, talk to me first about your reaction to Boris Johnson's resignation yesterday. Did it come at the right time, and what did you think of that speech?
He did the right thing, but it was too long in coming, and the speech really struck me with sour grapes. I think something a little more statesman-like would have been more in tune, more acceptable. So, wrong speech, but right thing, too late.
And of course, let's not forget how we got here. I mean, lots of scandals led up to that moment yesterday where Boris Johnson resigned. We had Partygate, we had Tory sleaze, we had the Chris Pincher affair just last week. What does the next leader need to have as qualities to bring that trust back of the British public and to get people back on side of the Conservative Party?
Well, someone a little more measured in their approach, somebody a little more calmer in what they do and how they go about things, a bit more thought given to what the country needs and what people want.
So you're saying you think we need the opposite in lots of ways to Boris Johnson?
We do now, I think. We've had the wham bam, thank you ma'am approach. I say something a little more calm and considered is what we need.
And finally, you know Mr Hunt very well. This is the seat, his seat that we're standing in right now. Do you think he's got what it takes to be next Conservative Party leader?
Yes, I do. Whenever I've met him, you get a good sense that he is listening to you closely. He does take an interest in what's happening at street level. And yeah, he comes across as a fairly calm, intelligent, thoughtful kind of person. So I think he probably would make an ideal leader of this country and of the Conservative Party.
Well, we'll just have to wait and see, won't we? Craig McGowan, thank you so much for your time. Well, Jeremy Hunt hasn't officially said that he's going to be running as Conservative Party leader, but as we've just heard from Craig here, he is very popular in this seat. As we said, he's held it since 2005, and it does look like the mid-section of next week we are going to be a little bit clearer on when we will know the timetable for the next Conservative Party leader.
OK. Ellie, thank you very much indeed.
Interesting one, Jeremy Hunt, isn't it? He's been sitting back for a while.
Desperate for the job.
Yes, he is, but he's trying not to look desperate, which a few others are looking, really, frankly, aren't they? I was asking earlier if you could send a private email or text or tweet to Boris Johnson this morning, what would it say? And Hazel in Cheshire says, I'd say chin up, Boris. Stand for mayor in one of the northern cities and come and build our northern powerhouse. Westminster's loss will be a great gain for us and you will be appreciated here. Joseph, meanwhile, says if he could send a message, it would say, you have failed due to your own doing. Your government lacked inspiration and policies. You, lying to cover for yourself and others, may possibly have been allowed to go unchallenged if you'd actually achieved anything in this country. That would have been a rather harsh one to receive this morning.
It's interesting. Tom in Cambridge says, for what it's worth, the Conservative Party, when they get a new leader, will be led by an unelected Prime Minister again. True. Time for a general election. Yeah, Rob says the last thing this country needs is another election.
Oh, yes.
Labour's trying to get in while the Conservatives are down. Labour did enough damage the last time they were in power. Can't win either which way.
No, but stick with us because in a few moments we'll be talking about the latest lawsuit for Prince Harry.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation. We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Now, let's change tack a little bit for you this morning and something away from politics, because a High Court judge is set to rule in a case between Prince Harry and the Home Office.
Yes, Prince Harry has taken legal action against the Home Office after being told that he would no longer be given the same degree of personal protective security when visiting from overseas, despite offering to pay for it.
Let's talk to our Raw reporter, Cameron Walker, who's here. Morning.
Good morning.
So, give us the details of this.
Right. So yesterday, a judge heard arguments to decide whether Harry has an arguable case for a judicial review. So, as you said, Prince Harry is challenging the Home Office over their decision not to allow him to pay for his own police protection for him and his family when he's in the UK. Now, yesterday, the court heard that there were significant tensions between Sir Edward Young, the Queen's private secretary, and Prince Harry at the time that this decision was made. And this is significant because the committee which made the decision not to allow Harry to pay for police protection, Sir Edward Young, the Queen's private secretary, and a number of other key figures within the royal household were actually sitting on this committee, which was news to Prince Harry at the time. And because there were significant tensions, Prince Harry's lawyers are arguing that the committee was not independent when they were making their decisions, and alleges that, you know, his offer for not to pay for police protection was not given, you know, when they were downgrading his security. It was, you know, bias, essentially. That's what
But they're saying there were already tensions then between those members of palace staff and
Prince Harry when the committee upon which they were sitting was deciding.
Exactly.
So that, on the face of it, would seem to be odd.
Yes, but on the other hand, the Home Office lawyers are saying that they were entitled to make the decision that they did, which was they would pay for Prince Harry's police protection on a case-by-case basis. So that's what we saw at the Jubilee celebrations when he came over.
I was wondering who'd pay for his security during the Jubilee, and it was us.
It was us. It was British taxpayers when he was staying at Frogmore Cottage in Windsor, and also when he was at Trooping the Colour ceremony as well, and official royal events. They say that the tensions between Sir Edward Young and Prince Harry are irrelevant because to his change in status, so it doesn't matter. And even if the committee had all the information and Prince Harry was allowed to make arguments on his own behalf, they would have come to the same conclusion. So the judge is going to take a couple of weeks to decide whether or not to bring this case forward for a full judicial review. But I think the key takeaway, Stephen and Anne, of this is that we now know that there were very much significant tensions between Prince Harry and the royal household when he decided to step back as a senior member of the working royal family.
Yeah, and amidst all of this going on, we're also set to get a ruling on a libel battle as well, aren't we, with the publishers of the Mail on Sunday?
Yes, so Prince Harry is suing the Mail on Sunday over an article they wrote about this separate case which we've just been talking about. So Prince Harry's lawyers argued that it was defamatory, the article that was written, which kind of essentially alleged that Prince Harry lied and cynically tried to manipulate public opinion, him and his PR team, and tried to keep his fight with the Home Office secret. But the lawyers for Associated Newspapers Limited, who owned the Mail on Sunday, said the article was not defamatory, that the article alleges that Harry's PR team did spin the story to put Harry in a more favourable light, but it did not allege that there was dishonesty against either Prince Harry or the publisher of, or his PR team. So we're expecting that judgment at about 10 o'clock this morning.
Right. So one judgment is at 10 o'clock this morning, and the other one is going to take a couple of weeks.
Yes, a couple of weeks. Yeah.
Well, it's not very happy for Prince Harry.
It's not a happy time, is it? No.
There's a lot of court cases.
Isn't it just? Yeah. Cameron, thank you very much indeed. At least Harry's not here. I mean, I know a lot of you watching and listening are not Harry fans. I always boil it down to the personal level. That's what I feel, the family side of it all, which I just think is so sad.
It's a bit like Boris Johnson and his family that we saw him and Carrie and the children yesterday. And you can't help but that you feel two different feelings, I think. A lot of people do it anyway. One thing is the greater picture, Harry within the royal family stepping aside and all the rest of it. And Boris, being Prime Minister or not being Prime Minister. And then you see them being within their own personal little bubble and you feel more compassion.
I did feel sorry. I was listening to Boris Johnson's speech yesterday as I was in the car, so I had GBNews radio on. And I felt very sorry that whatever you think of him, the fact that you could hear people at the end of Downing Street, someone was playing music quite loudly, there was quite a lot of booze, and you just sort of think, that's just not nice. Whatever you think of him, then it's just not a nice... I don't like that sort of yobbish...
No, and there were people lined up outside in the street, in Downing Street, just lined up next to the front door. And some of them were recognisable personalities. They were ministers or whatever. And some of them looked as though they were ladies who were made the tea and were secretaries and lots of younger people who were obviously aides of some sort. And you thought, it matters to them. It really does, because you can imagine them being very upset. It's always the people around, isn't it, who get affected too.
Who end up being, obviously, getting out of work or a different job at least. Look, we've got lots more coming up for you in a couple of minutes, including what's making the headlines. We'll have a guess in the papers this morning. Ella Whelan and Benedict Spence will be back in a couple of minutes.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation. We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We're trying to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back at 8:34. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
Are you watching on YouTube, perchance? If you are, click the subscribe button. It costs you nothing. We'll keep you up to date with everything that is going on. We are 300 away from 500,000 subscribers.
And that's pretty good because we only just got it going a while ago, didn't we?
Yeah.
So please, hit the button, like and subscribe, or subscribe and love, or whatever you do when you're on it. But it matters to us because it'd be lovely to see us bust through the 500,000 mark. This morning while we're on air. Wouldn't that be good?
Oh, yes, please. Yes, please. If you're watching on YouTube especially, get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk, and tell us where you are, because often people watching on YouTube think you're in other parts of the world. Quite a few in America, I understand.
Good.
So someone was telling me the other day.
Excellent.
There you go. Look, papers time for you now. Benedict Spence and Ella Whelan are here. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Ella, let's have a look at the Guardian, should we? And their talk of the Brexit populism that supported Boris in 2019, which is actually a fair point.
It's a point that's been made by quite a few of our viewers this morning.
It is a fair point, but what Jonathan Freeland's column in The Guardian goes into is not such a favourable view of Brexit as you might have expected, which is this idea that it's this constant row, which is whether or not Boris Johnson really was Mr. Brexit, whether or not he really, whether or not he was the hero of the moment in 2019 or whether it was a fudge, whether he is this horrendous populist, as the word populist has become equivalent to like villain or something, or whether he is the man of the people. And Jonathan Freeland comes down on a more cynical position, which says, he talks about the role of Dominic Cummings, and he says that the coming of Mr. Leave was an inevitability, that it was almost fate that led Boris Johnson to the position that he found himself in 2019. And that, he says Johnson deployed Brexit to engineer an election in which he would win his own mandate. So this very cynical idea that Boris simply used Brexit. I think that there is, I just called it cynical, there is an element of truth about that, which is that we know that Boris wrote those 2 articles. We know that he's somebody who has always found himself, until the last 24 hours, in the right place at the right time. But I think the question of the Brexit legacy is a really important one. Because for those of us who voted for it, which I did, and indeed those people who voted Remain but understand and respect democracy, there is a big question mark now over Brexit. We know that lots of people were, inside and outside of government, were rubbing their hands at the prospect of Boris Johnson going, because now the floor is open for a Remainer to come in, but not just a Remainer, someone who wants to, tinker with our relationship with the European Union, maybe go back into the single market, maybe make some concessions.
Well, and those comments from Guy Verhofstadt on Twitter yesterday, sort of implying, we're going to have a much better relationship with the UK. I mean, I thought that was
premature.
That was awful.
It must be said, in the last day or so, we've had Alistair Campbell, we've had Michael Heseltine, we've had Lord Adonis, everybody in the sort of the who's gallery of get rid of Boris Johnson and Brexit can be overturned. People have been trotted out in the media. It must be said, for all the front pages talking about paralysis and chaos. You want paralysis in this country, you want chaos. The thing would be for the Tory party to elect a new leader who would reverse Brexit, would look to change the relationship in favour of more union with Europe. I mean, I understand, it's a very hot issue for a lot of people, but really right now with everything else that's going on, the idea that you'd want to reopen that can of worms, restart those battles, I think that's deeply irresponsible.
Every morning when we've been talking about Boris's leadership, though, people have boiled it down to a Brexit thing. A lot of people getting in touch see Brexit in absolutely everything that's happening.
Yeah.
But I think the important point about that is, there's this tendency to treat Brexit as just a policy area, that it's simply about, things like trade, important things, but sort of not less political things, but things like trade or the specifics of fishing or the specifics of immigration, things like that. In actual fact, that's missing the point that the whole exciting aspect of what happened in 2016 was that it was a challenge to the official order of British politics, the establishment. It was a shake-up. And, Boris, unfortunately, squandered that sort of revolutionary democratic intent by, clamping down on civil liberties throughout the pandemic, not being serious about levelling up, not doing all these things. The kind of Brexit legacy he didn't take on board seriously. But there's a bigger question for any politician that now comes into the role of Prime Minister, which is what are you going to do with a large mandate from 2019 that was excited about the prospect of change? And I think that if you lose that that is the Brexit spirit, never mind the Brexit policy aspect. And if if a Remainer or a Ramona or someone who's intent on making Brexit an issue comes back in and squanders that further, then I'm very depressed about the prospect of politics.
Yeah. Let's look at the runners and riders then, Benedict.
Ooh.
In the Times.
It's so many of them. It's so exciting, which I think tells you exactly about the situation we are in terms of who is actually good enough to take over. Is that we have quite literally no idea because there are so many. At the very start, you've got the obvious ones. In the Times, it says Rishi Sunak is at the top. It still puts him as the favourite, even though I think that's shifted a little bit, almost by the hour. After that, you have Sajid Javid, the former health secretary who resigned twice on Boris Johnson, wants to get rid of Dominic Cummings and wants to get rid of the Prime Minister himself. So, not a bad innings if getting rid of people is kind of, your main aim, but doesn't necessarily inspire confidence or stability. Then you've got Liz Truss, who everybody knows has been on manoeuvres pretty much her entire political life, and is sort of hot-tailing it back to the UK as quickly as she can. And then, of course, you have Nadim Zahawi, who is the Chancellor who stepped into the breach.
In his foot.
Well, I thought it was very funny that Sajid Javid, having plunged the first knife in all those hours ago, Nadim Zahawi then comes in, patches him up before promptly stabbing himself.
Well, that's right. He let Boris promote him and then got rid of Boris.
I mean, he has rolled the dice. It must be said, of all the political careers of the Boris Johnson sort of era, his has been the most sort of meteoric and impressive, actually. He's done a very good job. He's risen from almost obscurity to vaccines minister to education, now Chancellor. But has he, in such a very short space of time, really gambled and potentially lost? Because a lot of people are very disappointed that he propped up Boris Johnson, and a lot of Johnson supporters are then subsequently disappointed that so quickly he came out very publicly and said it's time to go.
Very clever tactics, though, you could argue.
I tell you what, he's put himself front and centre of the conversation. Everybody must be.
Who's Suella Braverman?
Yeah,
working. No, not who is she. But who's she working for?
Well,
because she's got to be almost a bit like a stalking horse figure, hasn't she? In all of this, because she doesn't stand a chance.
I know, but this is the thing. When you saw her declare her intention to stand on national television in this very kind of pantomime, almost kind of a way. I think this is the problem about the Westminster bubble. So I think lots of these politicians don't realise how things come across to people sat at home watching and listening, which is that you just think this is just a game for these people. That's why I highlighted Jonathan Freeland talking about fate in The Guardian. There's this idea that even Boris Johnson in his resignation speak saying, "Oh, them's the breaks. This is how this world plays." There's no sense of public service. There's no sense of
it may be a game
of ideology,
to them, but it's not a game to people whose lives depend on them.
Well, this is the central point, which is that Nadim Zahawi and all these people having leadership campaigns in the wings. You know, Rishi Sunak buying a website or something that I've heard recently in the last 24 hours, and you know, launching Twitter pages for their campaigns. It's just so self-serving. And you know, we do need a leadership election. These things have to happen. That's the process. Blah blah blah. But it comes across to the nation. I think most people, even Labour, Tory voters, everyone. As you know, we've just at the start of this week, on Monday, I was on GB News, we were talking about the fuel protests, with people bringing motorways to a halt. You know, there are protests actually across the world in relation to fuel prices, cost of living crisis. And now we have to deal with you know, kissing babies and shaking hands and going through this rigmarole of a leadership election. Please.
I mean, Tom Tugendhat has already launched his campaign this morning, whilst we've been on air. Another one is Penny Mordaunt, and according to the Times, Andrea Leadsom is running her campaign.
No.
Well, Andrea Leadsom, of course, was down to the final two between her and Theresa May. How long has that been going on? You know, actually, it is that thing. You know, how long have, for all the talk of unity and, you know, not wanting to sort of upset the apple cart until the last few days, actually an awful lot of people seem to have been well prepared for this moment.
Yes.
And it does, you know, again, you have to say, actually, how seriously should we be taking these people? None of whom were prepared to step into the breach over the last few months when there were many opportunities to make a nice clean break with the Prime Minister. Even during the last vote of confidence, there was the opportunity to say, here is an alternative. And now, you know, it has taken this absolute sort of slow meltdown for the Prime Minister to just finally be shoved out. And then it turns out there are, 10, 15 people who will just very conveniently happen to have campaigns ready to go.
Yeah, I think I'd quite like to... I would quite like to see someone emerge from the shadows a little bit, someone you were expecting, and just come forward, and a real sort of fresh...
We all want to see a fresh talent, don't we?
Yeah.
There have been, you know, even someone like Ben Wallace has not been quite described as someone who nobody knew about, but someone like that who comes in and
very steady.
He wouldn't be my pick. There are some people talking about, I don't know, someone like Kemi Badenoch. There is this sort of, that's I think what Benedict is right to say. It's slightly galling to suggest that the doors are just thrown wide open and anyone could take a run and jump at it.
Jeremy Hunt was mentioned a bit earlier.
Jeremy Hunt
there's
is
a tired politician.
Been angling for this job for as long as I can remember, and I just think that, you know, the chaos that will be unleashed, certainly amongst the Brexiteer wing of the Tory party, were he to become leader, I don't see how that would be unifying or progressive. I'm sure that he will throw his name into the ring. I can't see that happening. I think he's just too contentious.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? Lovely, you two. Thank you very much. It's been good to see you both this morning, Benedict and Anna. Thank you. Just a little bit of our very own breaking news. And we have hit that 500,000
Oh, thank you so
YouTube.
much. That's brilliant.
500,000 people subscribed to GB News on YouTube. Thank you very much.
That is a massive step for us, and thank you for allowing it to happen. And actually, while we're on air, with Breakfast with me and him.
We should rebrand it officially.
Breakfast with me and him.
Love it. So, no, thank you very much indeed. Now, should we head back up to Bridlington?
Yes.
Beautiful Bridlington. It's time for On Your Doorstep.
We were saying earlier that Bridlington is a very well-known seaside town, absolutely gorgeous. It's also the largest lobster port in Europe. Didn't know that, though that must be very important to the local economy.
Absolutely. It's always been, to date, a safe seat for the Conservatives as well. Anna Riley is there for us this morning. Morning, Anna.
Good morning, Stephen and Anne. Yes, I am in Bondville Model Village at the moment. As you can see, it's a quaint little village, traditional British village, and it looks fantastic. And we are joined by the owner of this model village. Introduce yourself for our viewers and listeners.
Good morning, my name's Tim Whitehead and I'm the Managing Director of Bondville Model Village.
Tell us all about this model village.
The model village is all a 1/12 scale village, built traditionally of concrete. Everything is 1/12 scale, as I say. It consists of 200 individual properties, from abbeys to churches to pubs to garages. The models alone, there's about 600 or 700 of them, from cars to individual little models as well.
And it's a family-run business, isn't it?
It is, yes. Yeah, I mean, I bought it, in all fairness, in a state of disrepair, but never realised quite what I was letting myself in for. The tea shop's run by my wife, that's what I bought it for. It was a bit of a laugh, really, because I said to get a tea shop, I'm going to have to buy a village. And she said, you'll never be able to afford it. But we've managed. My son runs the gift shop and I run everything with the village with three other members of staff.
And what we're talking about this morning, Tim, is Boris Johnson standing down as Prime Minister and who could be next to take his place. What's your take on all of this?
Well, I think it's all a matter of trust. I think this is what the whole thing boils down to at the end of the day. We're going through very, very difficult times and we need somebody trustworthy at the helm. Likeable person is Boris, and he's had a lot of positive things. But I think under the conditions we're in at the moment, we need somebody trustworthy at the helm, and I don't think Boris is the right man for the job.
Who do you think it could be? Who would you trust as our next Prime Minister?
Well, as a Chancellor, he's seen us through quite a lot of difficult times so far. So I think really, better the devil you know, I'd go for probably Rishi Sunak.
And this is a very safe Conservative seat, isn't it? I mean, would you stand by the Conservatives in the next election?
Depending on who the candidate is, I wouldn't have got... I've voted Conservative all my life, but if it had been continuing the way it is at the moment, or has been in the past few months, I'm afraid I would probably not vote at all. So it all depends on the person that's put in. But I'm hoping that we get the right man for the job and I can continue to vote Conservative.
Thank you so much, Tim. Well, yes, I'm sure people like Tim and the rest of people living in Britain will certainly be looking for a model Prime Minister.
Oh, very nice.
Practicing that one, Anna. Thank you very much.
Oh, but that's so worth it. And it's lovely to see a model village. I absolutely love model villages.
So do I. What is it about them that's so fascinating?
Know. It's because they give you a sense of perfect environment.
But it's also the thing I always just want to really look through the windows and see what's inside.
You want to see little miniature people inside, don't you? I absolutely love model villages. I lived very near one as well.
Oh, do you?
Beaconsfield Model Village. It's very famous in the UK. And it's absolutely gorgeous. And but I mean, I'd love one in my own garden. I'd like to build one. In fact, that's an idea. I'd like water mills and running water, and I just love all of that. It's brilliant. I think that's why I build model railways. My sons say it's because I want to build the sort of perfect model of the perfect world.
Yeah,
it's escapism of sort, I suppose, isn't it? But that one looked absolutely gorgeous, and in the sunshine, it looks wonderful.
Lovely. I'd love to be there this morning. I'll tell you where else I'd like to be, which I've never. My brother's been. I've never been. I'd love to go. That's Orkney.
Oh.
The Orkney Islands, just incredible. Roy says, good morning and hello from Orkney. And this is his view.
And if you're listening on the radio, it's just the most beautiful view. Blue sky, sea, green grass. Oh, it looks wonderful.
Absolutely gorgeous.
It's a bit blustery, but rather nice.
Oh, yes. John says, watching your fantastic channel from Cyprus. And this is my sea view. Well, you can imagine, dear radio listeners, it looks absolutely beautiful. Sort
lovely
of
white painted villas, and the sea there in the distance. It's something wonderful about being able to see the sea.
Steve says, watch GB News every day. Always look forward to you both on GB News. Sent you a picture less than a minute away from my office, top of Portland. Look at that. And I don't know whether he's taken that this morning. Sea spray hitting like a sort of harbour wall or something.
But the way he's captured, what a photographer, the way you've captured the light through the sea spray, brilliant. And then Judith says, this is Milford-on-Sea this morning. Oh, we haven't got it.
That one.
Oh, well.
I bet
anyway,
it's lovely.
Lovely to hear from you in Milford-on-Sea. Yeah.
Oh, and someone was actually sending, we haven't actually got, we'll get round to it, which was Hornsey. Is it not Hornsey pottery?
Yes, it is. Very famous.
I'm sure I remember going there as a child.
I think so. Jane says, I live in a village on the edge of the North Yorkshire moors. When I open my curtains on a morning, I can see the sea from my bedroom window. Even though I'm several miles from the coast, it is stunning. I have the best of both the countryside and the coast.
Perfect. Can't beat it.
Getting us round Britain.
Which is what people who want to be the next Prime Minister are going to have to do. They're going to have to get round Britain and try and win over Conservative Party members. Let's get reaction from within the Conservative Party to what has been going on, the resignation of the Prime Minister. James Cleverly joins us. He's now the new Secretary of State for Education. Good morning. I don't know if congratulations are in order, are they? Because you must have accepted this new job knowing it was only going to last, 6-8 weeks or so?
Well, look,
being Secretary of State for Education is a fantastic job. We were reminded during the COVID disruptions just how important education is to all of us, not just young people, but all of us. It is a fantastic job. None of us in politics know how long we're going to be in ministerial appointments, but for as long as I'm in the job, I will throw all my energy at it. There are some important decisions we need to make over the summer, and it's a privilege to serve. So thank you for congratulating me on my appointment, and as I say, I will give it all my energy for as long as I'm in the role.
What was it like walking in the department for the first time? Because, I mean, there's hardly anyone there, is there? And presumably the civil servants have just been keeping things ticking over, whilst ministers and aides all around them have been quitting.
Well, when I stepped into the department, I had an incredibly warm welcome. Obviously, there's been a lot of turbulence and disruption at ministerial level in the department, but we have fantastic officials, and of course the leadership in the education sector around the country are incredibly professional as well. The Prime Minister has been making ministerial appointments. He appointed Will Quince back into the department, a very well liked, very professional, very experienced minister. So he's come back to the department yesterday, and I know the Prime Minister will be making other ministerial appointments. So we've hit the ground running. I spoke to union leaders and others yesterday. I will be continuing to work with the profession and my officials and the new ministerial team as they're appointed.
Hey, look, we are going to, whether people like it or not, and it's a 50-50 split maybe amongst our viewers and listeners this morning, we are going to have a new Prime Minister by, well, probably the start of September. Will you throw your hat into the ring as you have done once before, or can you rule that out?
So I'm not going to be putting myself forward. Being Prime Minister is a fantastic job. We have a wonderful range of candidates, some of whom have declared, some have yet to declare, but we suspect they might. My personal circumstances mean that I won't be putting myself forward, but I'm also confident that we have a pool of talent which will enable us to choose someone with fantastic experience, whoever that might be, and then deliver on what we are all in government to do, which is serve the British people.
We know who the likely runners and riders are then, who are throwing their hats into the ring. Who are you likely to support?
I'm not going to make any announcements about who I might support at the moment. We haven't seen who is going to be running yet, so I want to make sure that what I do personally reflects what we're doing as a process, which is to make sure it's professional, but also to make sure it's discharged quickly. But I'll be waiting until I see the full slate before deciding who I'm going to support.
I'll tell you what is reassuring, Minister, is that, here you are on TV this morning and on radio, you're sounding very calm, very considered, it inspires confidence, that's all good, but it comes after what has been the most unedifying couple of days. I mean, that has got to have done some damage to politics, to government, to the Conservative Party, surely.
Well, look, thank you for the first half of that question. I think if you'd stopped there, I'd have been very, very happy. But you are right that the events of this week have been, completely unprecedented. Global politics is turbulent. I think in the UK, we'd always been very proud of the fact that we had much calmer politics. But frankly, from the day I was elected in 2015, as we went through the referendum on our membership of the European Union, then the hung Parliament, then the delivery of Brexit, now this, it has been incredibly turbulent. I think a period of calmness is something that we would all enjoy. That's what I'm going to work towards, and I have no doubt that whoever becomes Prime Minister in the forthcoming weeks will also want to bring a degree of calm to the British political scene.
And finally, your views on whether Boris Johnson should stay in the Premiership during the election of another leader. Should he stay where he is?
Yes, look, he has announced that he is leaving. That has meant that a lot of people who had said that he needed to go and had left government now feel comfortable coming back into government. He has said that the timescale for his departure will be defined by the 1922 committee and the party as we go through this process. We do need to have a process, that is important, but it also needs to be professional and quick. And once a successor has been chosen, the Prime Minister will stand down and hand over. And I think that is the most, I think that's the most pragmatic, professional and least disruptive way of doing it.
Okay. Secretary of State. It's nice to use the new title. Thanks for talking to us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I tell you
nice,
what, I mean that in the most sincere terms, to talk to a politician at the moment who is calm and considered.
Yes, you're
is
right.
Very nice.
It is reassuring.
Yeah. Anyway, I love what
we need a bit more of, isn't it now?
GB Views at gbnews.uk. Let us know what you think. We're back with all the top stories in a couple of minutes.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to Friday's forecast. Plenty of sunshine to come across the UK today. However, we could see some thicker cloud, patchy light rain across the far northwest. And the reason for this is a weak weather front sits across parts of Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, under this big area of high pressure. So most places will be dry and settled, but just a little bit more cloud for one or two of us. First thing Friday morning, the best of the sunshine across eastern and southern England. Thicker cloud across parts of Wales, the West Midlands, northwest England will disperse as the morning goes on. However, across Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, bit of a grey morning here, the risk of some light rain and drizzle. But this weather front just slowly pushes a little bit further south through the afternoon, allowing it to brighten up across Scotland. Temperatures across the board 20 to 25 Celsius, but in the southeast 28, possibly 29 degrees. So a warm evening to come across much of the UK. Plenty of sunshine ahead of dusk across England and Wales. Thicker cloud pushing from Northern Ireland into northwest England, North Wales. Perhaps the odd spot of drizzle, but many places dry during the early hours into Saturday morning. Just one or two showers across Scotland, but overall another mild night. Temperatures 13 to 15 Celsius to start Saturday morning, but plenty of dry weather, plenty of sunshine to get going. A bit more cloud across western areas, but this dispersing as the morning goes on. Blue skies for many as we move through the day. However, another weak weather front will move into parts of Northern Ireland, western Scotland, perhaps thick enough for a bit of drizzle, but elsewhere, lots of sunshine, high UV levels and high temperatures as well, 27 Celsius towards the southeast. And this continues over the next few days. Plenty of sunshine, lots of dry weather and temperatures rising further. We could see the high 20s by Sunday and even up to 30 or 31 as we head towards Monday.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
The race to find a new Conservative Party leader and therefore Prime Minister begins following Boris Johnson's resignation yesterday.
Good morning, it's 2 minutes past 9 on Friday the 8th of July. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Anne.
We're live across the whole of the UK on your TV and your radio and online, so whatever you're up to, you can take us with you today. And this is what you're waking up to.
Boris Johnson will be out of number 10 by October, staying on until a successor is found. In his speech outside Downing Street, he thanked the British public for their support and reiterated the government's commitment both to supporting Ukraine and the levelling up agenda.
Well, the timetable for the election will be set out next week. Early favourites include the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, former Chancellor Rishi Sunak, and Penny Mordaunt, a bit of an outsider, currently the Trade Minister.
So what do you think? As ever, you can join in any of our discussions by emailing us, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet us @gbnews.
And of course, you can stay up to date by subscribing for free to the GB News YouTube channel. We're very proud to say we've just hit 500,000 subscribers in the last half hour, and that is thanks to you. Thank you very much indeed for doing that. If you want to join in and see what all the fuss is about, just click on that subscribe button. So, the Prime Minister has resigned as leader of the Conservative Party. Well, you know that. He's fought to remain in power, but he said he felt it was his duty to step down. It was the will of his party, he said.
Yeah, and of course, this all comes after, 3 days of revolt from his own party that saw almost 60 MPs, including 5 cabinet ministers, quit.
However, the PM will continue in the role in number 10. He calls it the best job in the world, so he'll stay there until his successor is actually chosen.
Well, standing outside his front door right now is GB News' political correspondent, Tom Harwood. Hello there, Tom. It's been an amazing time, and goodness only knows what's gone on behind the front door of number 10. What do you think's going on at the moment?
Gosh, it seems like it's the calm after the storm, really, now. Everyone's sort of taking a big, deep breath. Looking at some of the front pages of the papers, some are jubilant this morning, others are aghast. What have they done, says the front page of the Daily Mail today. And I think that, to some extent, what we're seeing now is the start of a long weekend of rest, of breathing, of taking a step back from what has gone on over what was an incredibly tumultuous 4-day period of constitutional churn. But whilst many people will be trying to take a break and step back, there'll be lots of people working incredibly hard. And who will those people be? Well, the potential candidates and their leadership teams. Already scurrying away, the Foreign Secretary Liz Truss flying back from Indonesia, of course, and many others bringing together teams of whether it's former special advisors, people they know and trust well, or indeed other MPs to see who they might put on their own campaign teams. There'll be a lot of behind-the-scenes work of organising this weekend, and then the real contest starts next week, of course. In the midst of all of this, we're seeing these 1922 committee executive elections. They conclude on Monday, and what does that mean? Well, when the new executive is in place on Monday, they can then decide the rules and the timeline of the contest that is to come. And that means, if it's going to follow anything like the last leadership election, perhaps 45 days of contest. First, of course, the last couple of weeks of this parliamentary term before the summer recess, whittling the candidates down. And of course, it's a very, very big spread of candidates. It's very hard to judge who will be in those final 2, but MPs whittle it down to final 2 candidates who then go out out to the Tory party membership, around 150,000 of them around the country, who will have several weeks to decide. No doubt there'll be live debates, hustings around the country from those final two candidates, and the Tory membership will choose the next Prime Minister, likely to be in place certainly by the Conservative Party conference, perhaps by the start of the next parliamentary term after summer recess. So that would be the 5th of September. So some point in September we would be able to expect a new Prime Minister. One word of caution that people are saying is that whilst everyone wants this to be a smooth, orderly and not too extended process, the Conservative Party is very wary of picking someone too quickly and not getting the proper scrutiny required of delivering a stable and successful Prime Minister of the United Kingdom.
OK, Tom, thank you. Yes, stability is what we need. That sounds like a campaign slogan from
It really
Mrs.
does.
May, doesn't it?
I suppose when you think about it, those very candidates are going to do the media like crazy over the next few weeks. So we'll be meeting them and they'll be hoping to impress with personality and policy and everything else. Interesting, because we may find out more about those that we don't know terribly well. Tom Tugendhat, for instance, I don't know very well, but he sounds on paper like a very good runner.
But he's a Remainer, or was a Remainer, which a lot of Conservative Party members may be not happy with.
Ben Wallace.
Don't you know he's a Defence Secretary.
Yeah.
It's such
Don't
an
know
important
very much
role.
about him.
Don't know much about him at all.
And there are lots of others, but we will get the chance, I suppose, over the next few weeks to get to know them.
I think Johnny Mercer would be great. There was someone, I can't remember who it was, someone tweeted me this morning and said, stop bleating on about the soldier boy. Because he used to be a soldier, of course.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's
Why not?
I
Maybe
tell you
that's what we need.
the thing that impressed me was just the fact that on the day, all the PMQs and all the rest of it on Wednesday, when everyone was talking about all of this, he asked a question about the armed forces and veterans.
Yeah, because
which he got stick for. But he said, this is who I'm representing, and I'm here to do this job. And that sort of integrity and determination, I just found quite refreshing.
Well, at the end of the day, that's what they are in Parliament for. Racing to become the next Prime Minister or the next leader is not what you vote them in for, is it? You vote them in to do the job for you in your constituency.
Well, we do know that some people aren't standing. James Cleverly is not standing, as he told us here a couple of minutes ago. He's the new Education Secretary.
Dominic Raab, he's not standing. He said he's not.
As former Secretary of State for Housing and Levelling Up, Michael Gove, not standing either.
So, who are the main contenders and who could become our next Prime Minister?
We've sent our reporters out and about this morning. Jeff Moody, Ellie Costello and Will Hollis are in the constituencies of some possible contenders. So, Will, let's start with you. Where are you?
Good morning. Yeah, you join me by the River Avon right now in Stratford-upon-Avon. Of course, it's the home of our very famous bard, another famous William Shakespeare. I suppose the Boris Johnson premiership ended a bit like a Shakespeare, a little bit of comedy if you were watching certain things that were being said on Twitter, tragedy towards the end. Some people might have described it as a coup against him, and he isn't yet in the history books yet, but I'm sure these moments will be spoken about in history lessons, politics lessons for many years to come. But who are the people that are running? Well, where I am right now is the constituency of Nadhim Zahawi. He's the current Chancellor. Other credentials that he has are, of course, as the Vaccine Minister back in 2020. In 2021, he took over from Gavin Williamson as the Education Minister. Now, he isn't somebody that has announced that he is planning to run yet, but he's certainly one of the front runners, depending on where you might look on all of these different polls, on all of these different places across the journalistic spectrum, those key kind of 5, 6, 7 people whose names are being bandied around. In terms of who Nadhim Zahawi is, well, he's been in power here in this constituency since 2010. His roots come from Iraq. He's born to Kurdish parents. He left because of persecution or the threat of persecution under Saddam Hussein when he came into power. So he's a person that has set himself roots here in Britain. He also started the polling company YouGov, so he's got a lot of experience, but he is one person that hasn't put his hat into the ring officially yet. So you might be saying, to be or not to be, that is the question.
Oh, very nice. So, thank you very much, Will.
So let's go to Jeff now. Where are you and who's your MP?
I am in Fareham in Hampshire. Suella Braverman is the one that I will be talking about. I've been speaking to some of the people here in the last few minutes. I spoke to the chairman of the Conservative Party Association here. He says they're all completely behind her, they're all backing her. Talking to some people in the street just now who said that yes, they support her and they back her, but they don't think she stands much of a chance. She's not particularly well known nationally at the moment, but as you said just now, Anne, that's all about to change in the next few days and weeks. Now, she made her nomination live on television. She was being interviewed on ITV by Robert Peston, and he asked her directly, would you consider standing? And she said yes. And that was regarded as very refreshing, a politician who gives a straight answer to a straight question. She announced that she would run, but what sort of candidate will she make? Well, we know for a start that she was very active in the movement to get us out of the European Union. She was a prominent Brexiteer, and she took most of her constituency with her on that. 55% of people round here voted to leave the European Union. She went on to chair various committees. She chaired the European Research Group, which was a pro-leave group of Conservative MPs. And in 2018, she was appointed the Parliamentary Under-Secretary for the EU, but she quit in protest at Theresa May's Brexit deal. That feels like a lifetime ago, doesn't it? When everyone was talking about how the deal wasn't going through well and Theresa May fell on her sword. Well, Suella resigned as part of that. She was one of those that resigned there. She's also, if you want to know where she stands on the whole woke, anti-woke issue, she's very, very, very anti-woke. In fact, she's one of the first people to coin the phrase cultural Marxism. When she did, she said, we have a culture evolving from the far left, which is about sniffing out freedom of expression. Those comments were not universally accepted. They caused a lot of offence to a lot of people. They were regarded as hate speech. But it took an intervention by the Jewish communities. The Board of Deputies of British Jews eventually came forward and said, look, there's been allegations that she's anti-Semitic. We see no signs of that. She's clearly a friend of the Jewish community. She supports the government's plans for moving asylum seekers to Rwanda. She's very vocal in her support for that. So she's a little bit further to the right than Boris is, who was certainly quite central in a lot of his policies and his views. She's certainly a bit more towards the right. But she said on the radio yesterday that she believes that the manifesto that was presented to the electorate, the manifesto that won huge plaudits across the country, that got Boris an 80-seat majority, she says that manifesto stands still and that she will still stand on that very same manifesto. So she's promising more of the same, just with a very, very different figure in charge.
OK, Jeff, thank you. Finally, let's head down to Ellie Costello. Morning, Ellie, where are you?
Yes, good morning, Stephen and Anne, and welcome to the beautiful town of Hazelmere in southwest Surrey. Now, this is Jeremy Hunt's seat. He has held this seat since 2005. Now, he hasn't officially put himself forward as a candidate for the next Tory leader, but the Independent newspaper this morning has got him as a front-runner alongside Tom Tugendhat. So, does he have what it takes to be the next Tory party leader? Well, someone who thinks he might is Rory Welsh, who's the campaign manager for Southwest Surrey Conservatives. Good morning to you, Rory.
Good morning.
And thank you so much for joining us. So first of all, quick reaction from you about Boris Johnson's resignation yesterday and that speech.
I thought it was disappointing, both in its lack of contrition and responsibility. I mean, there was talk of the herd moving. The herd didn't arbitrarily move. They reacted, and they reacted according to their values, their consciences and their constituencies. And to say otherwise would be denying a very significant degree of personal responsibility and agency.
Rory, we can't deny how we got here. I mean, there have been a series of scandals in recent months, Partygate, Tory sleaze, Chris Pincher affair just last week. Lots of people have lost trust in the Conservative Party, and there is now going to be a lot of pressure on this next leader to turn that trust back around. Do you think Jeremy Hunt can do this?
Yeah, well, it's the party that lost the faith of the people to a very large degree, and particularly over the recent couple of days. And so it's incumbent upon us, the party as a whole, to regain that. And there's no point blaming an outgoing Prime Minister for it. It is the job of the incoming person to regain it. And that's going to be a question of experience and of values. And I believe firmly that Jeremy has both. He's been elected by the people of South West Surrey here 5 times. He's been a minister 3 times. And you struggle to find anyone who has a bad word to say about him, either in the constituency or in the Commons. And so I think that mixture of experience and values sets him up very well if he were to choose to run.
And what can we expect from Jeremy Hunt as a Tory party leader? What kind of qualities do you think he brings to the role?
I think there's several important things. The first of which is his honesty, and that is well known. He's a decent, upstanding man. He is scandal-free. He does the right thing. He works incredibly hard for this constituency. The experience, as I say, having a number of different portfolios, and also just as a hard-working constituency MP going on the doorstep around here. And also, I think the really important one for me is humility. Which perhaps and almost certainly was lacking in the last administration. And I think that hit home for me when I was on the doorstep with Jeremy but a few weeks ago, and we were talking to someone who was very disappointed, quite understandably, in the tone and culture of this government and about their values and about their integrity. And Jeremy didn't try to palm it off, wriggle out of it, offer excuses. He listened. He had the humility to listen and to hear so that he might act on it. And for me, that's a leader.
Rory Welsh, fascinating to talk to you. Thank you very, very much. There you go. That's Rory's opinion. He clearly thinks Jeremy Hunt would make a fantastic Tory party leader. But as we just heard from Tom Harwood, there is a long list of very capable and highly motivated individuals that will be running for Tory party leader. And it will become very clear in the next few weeks who those final 2 are. Will Jeremy Hunt be in it? We'll just have to wait and see.
We will indeed. Ellie, thank you very much indeed.
Yes, thank you. It was Boris Johnson himself who said just a couple of days ago, don't underestimate the talent and sheer ambition of the remaining MPs that he was thinking of then putting into cabinet and ministerial positions, but now could well be thinking of standing against him.
Yeah.
Well, it's not against him now. Actually, one of our viewers has said, why doesn't Boris Johnson run? Julian says, Boris Johnson should be a candidate in the leadership election. The electors voted for Boris, and I will not forgive the Conservative Party for the treacherous treatment that Boris has been dealt.
Well, he could stand. Nothing's stopping him, but would he get to the final 2? Because that's dependent on the votes of Conservative MPs, so very unlikely. Look, don't go anywhere. We're going to be talking to Sir Bob Neill for his thoughts on the future of the Conservative Party in just a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation. We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
So whether you love him or not, Boris Johnson is not going to be Prime Minister for much longer. Elizabeth says, I don't think any replacement for Boris should come from the ministers who resigned and ousted him from office. Well,
you wouldn't have many left, though, if you didn't go
this is
there.
the problem. I wonder what one MP, Conservative MP, Sir Bob Neal, makes of comments like that. Morning to you, Sir Bob. Look, what should be happening now moving forward, do you think?
Well, we need to move on as quickly as possible now. Boris had his good points and his bad points, but the decisions taken and a long drawn-out transition isn't in anybody's interest, it seems to me. So what I think we should be doing is, ideally, it would be better if we'd had an interim Prime Minister. Don't think that's realistic at the moment. What we should do, for the sake of the country, is to speed up the process so that we know where we stand. The MPs ought to be getting on and reducing the shortlist to 2. I would suggest next week, certainly by the time Parliament is supposed to break on the 20th. And then, in the modern age, the Conservative Party's got a centralised list of its members. You can do hustings on down the line, Zoom videos and so on. You can live stream the hustings. You can send out all the ballots by email and vote electronically. You don't have to hang around until October or anything like that. We should be looking to have somebody in place by the time Parliament comes back on the 5th of September.
And by the look of it, that, as you say, is entirely possible. Of course, it's up to the 1922 committee, but frankly, they're used to this sort of thing by now, aren't they?
Well, it's happened a bit more often than one would like, actually. But, let's face it, sadly, for good or ill, this is a well-trodden path now, so there's no excuse for not getting on with it sharpish.
Why do you think Boris Johnson shouldn't stay in number 10 until there is a new leader? Why an interim Prime Minister? I mean, we've had the outgoing one stay before.
I think the difference, unfortunately, is the circumstances under which they left. In the end of the day, David Cameron had resigned of his own volition because he'd lost the referendum, and that was a clear policy change was going to happen. Theresa May, as a decision, was essentially because of a need for a change of policy. There were policy disagreements. Here, I'm afraid, it was Boris's standards and conduct. So it was about the individual rather than the policies. And I think that makes it harder for there to be credibility. And I think just actually the long drawn-out way in which he hung on for a couple of days has made it harder. If he'd read the writing on the wall at the beginning of the week, then it would have been easier for him to be a credible figure as a transition. But as it is, let's make that as short as is comfortable. And I thought that would be more comfortable for him too, because it's going to be pretty frustrating. He's sitting there with very little ability to do anything new. That's not his nature. It also means it.
Oh, I think we're just losing the signal. But actually, let us just say thanks very much indeed for joining us with your views today. Your signal's gone a bit wobbly, and anyway, we're heading swiftly towards the end of the programme.
We are. We picked this one up. Michael in Kingston's been in touch saying, following the resignation of Boris, will he now run for President of the United States? He is an American citizen, or can classify as one, because he was born in New York, so he could technically run.
Do you know, that might just be an idea. Cynthia in Abingdon says, so many thanks. You're always polite, friendly, professional, smartly dressed.
Oh, thank you.
And smiling. New suit, yeah. The guest speakers on your programme are excellent. What more can I say? The start of the day is so much better now. I think you can conclude we are big fans of GB News. And yes, we do tell all our friends.
Very nice that more people are watching and listening and subscribing on YouTube. And we feel that. More than 850 people emailing in this morning, more than 500,000 people subscribed to the YouTube channel. We're going places. Have no doubt about it.
Well, we are the People's Channel. Don't forget that too.
Tom Harwood's up next with more on the goings-on in Downing Street. He'll have the briefing in a couple of minutes.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to Friday's forecast. Plenty of sunshine to come across the UK today. However, we could see some thicker cloud, patchy light rain across the far northwest. And the reason for this is a weak weather front sits across parts of Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, under this big area of high pressure. So most places will be dry and settled, but just a little bit more cloud for one or two of us. First thing Friday morning, the best of the sunshine across eastern and southern England. Thicker cloud across parts of Wales, the West Midlands, northwest England will disperse as the morning goes on. However, across Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, bit of a grey morning here, the risk of some light rain and drizzle. But this weather front just slowly pushes a little bit further south through the afternoon, allowing it to brighten up across Scotland. Temperatures across the board, 20 to 25 Celsius, but in the southeast, 28, possibly 29 degrees. So a warm evening to come across much of the UK. Plenty of sunshine ahead of dusk across England and Wales. Thicker cloud pushing from Northern Ireland into northwest England, North Wales. Perhaps the odd spot of drizzle, but many places dry during the early hours into Saturday morning. Just one or two showers across Scotland, but overall another mild night. Temperatures 13 to 15 Celsius to start Saturday morning, but plenty of dry weather, plenty of sunshine to get going. A bit more cloud across western areas, but this dispersing as the morning goes on. Blue skies for many as we move through the day. However, another weak weather front will move into parts of Northern Ireland, western Scotland, perhaps thick enough for a bit of drizzle, but elsewhere, lots of sunshine, high UV levels and high temperatures as well, 27 Celsius towards the southeast. And this continues over the next few days. Plenty of sunshine, lots of dry weather and temperatures rising further. We could see the high 20s by Sunday and even up to 30 or 31 as we head towards Monday.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity. That's the question. That's two questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation. We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
A very good morning to you and welcome to the briefing with me, Tom Harwood. It's the morning after the day before, and as the dust settles here after the Conservative Party's bout of regicide, we'll be looking ahead to what's to come in the next few weeks. How long will Boris stay on? What will the Conservative leadership contest look like? And who might be the next Prime Minister? All that to come after the headlines.
Thank you, Tom. It's 9:31. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The race for who's going to replace Boris Johnson as Prime Minister following his resignation yesterday as leader of the Conservative Party has begun. With no clear frontrunner, around a dozen potential candidates are assessing whether they have the support to mount leadership bids. Tom Tugendhat, the Commons Foreign Affairs Committee chairman, has become the first contender to throw his hat in the ring. It's believed former Chancellor Rishi Sunak and ex-Health Secretary Sajid Javid could also be considering the job. Meanwhile, there's growing pressure on Boris Johnson to step down immediately rather than wait for a new leader. Former Prime Minister Sir John Major is among those backing Deputy PM Dominic Raab to take over in the interim. But Downing Street said Mr Johnson feels a strong sense of duty to stay on. The Japanese government says its former prime minister is in a grave condition after being shot at a campaign event. Japanese media say Shinzo Abe was shot from behind while giving a speech in the western city of Nara and had suffered heart failure. It's being reported the suspect told police he was unhappy with Abe and intended on killing him. Current Prime Minister Fumio Kishida has condemned the act. And excitement is building for tennis fans today as Cameron Norrie faces the biggest match of his career in Wimbledon men's semi-final. The 26-year-old is the fourth British man to ever reach the last four at the All England club. He'll play top seed Novak Djokovic on centre court this afternoon. Meanwhile, semi-final match between Nick Kyrgios and Rafa Nadal won't be going ahead as Rafa Nadal had to pull out with an injury, sending Kyrgios straight through to the final. And good luck to Cameron Norrie. TV online and DAB Plus radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to the briefing with the latest from Westminster with Tom.
Well, hello and welcome to the briefing. It's 9:33 and I'm here live in Downing Street assessing what on earth has taken place over the last week or so. Of course, the resignation of Boris Johnson yesterday felt in the end like a long time coming, although if we were to have this discussion even last Friday, it would have seemed an absolute world away. The speed at which the mood in Westminster changed and, as the Prime Minister described it yesterday, the herd of Westminster changing, well, that all became very quick. Our national reporter Paul Hawkins has been exploring what's been going on in the last week or so. What led to the downfall of Boris Johnson?
The straw that broke Boris Johnson's back began on the 29th of June here at this private members' Tory club in central London. What happened here and how the PM dealt with it was the final nail in the coffin for his premiership.
2 days later, on the 1st of July, a story is printed alleging Tory Tamworth MP Chris Pincher was drunkenly groping men at the Carlton Club. He resigns as Deputy Chief Whip, saying he embarrassed himself after drinking too much, but denies the other allegations.
The same day, Number 10 says the PM wasn't aware of specific allegations against Chris Pincher. But later that day, Parliament's watchdog receives a complaint against Chris Pincher and the whip is withdrawn from him. In other words, he now sits as an independent MP.
On July the 3rd and 4th, two ministers both publicly say the PM didn't know about any specific allegations against Chris Pincher before making him Deputy Chief Whip in February. Then later on July the 4th, the line from Number 10 shifts. The Prime Minister was aware of some allegations.
On July the 5th, Dominic Raab admits that Chris Pincher was investigated in 2019 over alleged inappropriate behaviour while he was a minister here at the Foreign Office.
Half an hour later, former Chief Diplomat Simon MacDonald publishes a letter alleging Boris Johnson did know about the 2019 investigation and warning Number 10 it needs to come clean.
4.5 hours later, it did.
The Prime Minister did not immediately recall the conversation in late 2019 about this incident
6 hours later came this.
You know, if I had my time again, I would think back on it and recognise that he wasn't going to learn any lesson, and he wasn't going to change.
2 minutes later, his health secretary resigns. 7 minutes later, his chancellor. By 9:30 a.m. on Thursday, 59 members of the government had resigned. Boris Johnson then quit, making him number 60.
The herd instinct is powerful. When the herd moves, it moves. And, my friends, in politics, no one is remotely indispensable.
Operation Save Big Dog had failed. Paul Hawkins, GB News.
Well, Paul Hawkins there looking back at what has happened over the last few days. It's time now, though, to look forward. What on earth is going to be taking place over the days and indeed weeks? Yesterday, the Prime Minister announced that it will be next week that the 1922 committee will set out the rules of the leadership contest. Will set out the timeline, the timescale of that contest as well. Entirely independent as it is, elected by the backbenchers of the Conservative Party. One slight snag in this process, however, is that currently the 1922 executive is undergoing an election. They elect their new executive on Monday, so it's not until after that election has taken place that the executive can meet for the first time, and that freshly elected executive of the 1922 committee can then, in their first meeting, thrash out the terms of that contest. If it's anything like the contest that took place in 2019 upon the resignation of Theresa May, what we'll see is around a 45-day period. First, MPs, of course, whittling down the wide candidate list that we're expecting at the start, down to just 2 MPs, 2 candidates to become the next Prime Minister, who then take their case to Conservative Party members in the country. Now, it will be around 150,000 Conservative Party members that will be able to vote by postal ballot in terms of who becomes the next Prime Minister. And if anyone watching is not a member of the Conservative Party, I'm afraid I've got some bad news for those who are thinking they might sign up today in order to get a vote. The Conservative Party implements a 3-month period of exclusion where new members can't take part in these sorts of elections until they've been a member for 3 months. This is to stop the sort of infiltration that might go on, the sort of infiltration that happened in the Labour Party in 2015, of course, when Jeremy Corbyn became their party leader. Different rules with the Conservatives, higher thresholds in terms of getting those candidates to that final stage, and then only members who have been members for more than 3 months being able to vote there on who becomes that Prime Minister. It's a weighty task, and we're expecting the rules to be very similar to those last time round. Last time round it took 10 MPs to nominate a candidate to get onto that leadership ballot to then be whittled down. We're hearing some speculation this time around it might well be 20 MPs. That threshold in order to get nominated to be a candidate might rise a little bit. But of course, we'll know all of this. It will be set out early next week by the 1922 committee. That's the process. But what about the candidates? We've been hearing a lot of names floating around. Indeed, some names have announced. Tom Tugendhat announcing in the Telegraph last night. Well, Mark White, our Home Affairs and Security editor, has been looking at some of the candidates who may well be standing as well.
For a long time, Rishi Sunak seemed the likely favourite in any leadership contest after he pushed through billions of extra funding to protect jobs when the pandemic struck. But the former Chancellor's stock took a bit of a battering more recently, following the revelations that his wife had non-domicile status for tax purposes and he'd held onto his US green card while serving in the government. But he still remains pretty popular within the party. In recent months, the Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss, has clearly been positioning herself for a leadership run, appearing at times to channel her inner Margaret Thatcher with her high-profile interventions and photo opportunities. She has strong grassroots support within the party, and the war in Ukraine has certainly pushed up her public profile. It's done the same for the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace. The former army officer has been widely praised for his deft handling of the UK's military response to the crisis, a key figure in providing support and training for Ukraine's armed forces. He's admired as a highly capable cabinet minister who has widespread support from all wings of the party. Although he's played down any interest in the top job, he's a definite contender. Suella Braverman became the first cabinet minister to publicly announce her intention to stand during a television interview on Wednesday night. She was appointed Boris Johnson's Attorney General 2 years ago. She's positioning herself as an anti-woke candidate, but for now at least, she's not seen as one of the favourites. Tory rebel Steve Baker has pretty much confirmed he'll also be running for the top job. The Brexiteer, who played a leading role in orchestrating the resignation of Theresa May, might struggle to win over many on the left wing of the party, but he told GB News he's getting lots of support from serious figures.
And I'm doing that out of respect for Conservative home readers and the many people who I'm afraid, to the disappointment of my critics, are in fact lighting up my phone encouraging me to go for it. You know, people have watched me provide leadership for 7 years, sometimes for up to a third of the Conservative Party, and successfully.
Coming second to Boris Johnson in the last leadership election, Jeremy Hunt has been out of office for the past 3 years. But there's little doubt the former Foreign Secretary will seize the opportunity to throw his hat back into the ring. Although his strong support for tough lockdown measures during the pandemic won't sit well with some in the party. Well, less than 2 days after accepting the job as Chancellor and then robustly supporting Boris Johnson on the airwaves, Nadhim Zahawi pretty much wielded the killer blow by very publicly demanding the Prime Minister's resignation. Little surprise to those in the party who say he's been quietly plotting a leadership bid for months. He's certainly seen as a safe pair of hands. Well, the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, is highly popular on the right of the party, where they support her tough line on the small boats crisis. But her plans to send asylum seekers to Rwanda have run into inevitable legal obstacles. Her staunch support of Boris Johnson, while many others called on him to go, might also impact on her chances. The former Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, was the first to resign on Tuesday, sparking the final push to get rid of Boris Johnson. The former Chancellor and Home Secretary, he certainly has the political pedigree for the top job. He may not have the charisma of some of the other candidates, but he's clearly trying to position himself as a man of integrity. Back in January, Tom Tugendhat, the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, announced his intention to stand for leader should Boris Johnson be turfed out. A Remain supporter in 2016, the former soldier might struggle to cut through with many Brexiteers in the party, but he's greatly admired as a very capable and thoughtful politician.
Well, thank you, Mark White, for that good look over of who may well be standing and who we might well be hearing quite a lot more from over the next few weeks. But of course, it's all about what's happening in those next few weeks. Who is going to be in the next, perhaps 45 days, entering that big, black, shiny door behind me? Well, I'm delighted to say that we can turn now to some of our video journalists around the country, some of our reporters in different regions of the United Kingdom, to see what's going on in the constituencies of some of these candidates, or indeed, I should say, potential candidates at this stage. Ed Crawford is currently in the constituency of Liz Truss. The Foreign Secretary, of course, flew back from Indonesia at the end of this week in order to perhaps shore up some of her support. Ed, what's the mood in Norfolk?
Thanks, Dom. The mood in Norfolk is mixed. I've been speaking to lots of people here in Thetford, which is a large town in Liz Truss's constituency, and a lot of people have actually been saying that they're sad Boris has gone. They don't feel that, yes, he wasn't the best, but he certainly wasn't the worst. And a lot of people have been saying to me he was the best of a bad bunch. Quite a few people have also been expressing concerns about Liz Truss's almost militaristic-like virtues. On one hand, she talks about reducing the British Armed Forces by 10,000. On the other hand, she's up for unlimited bankrolling of the Ukrainian conflict, and she's also floated the idea of arming Taiwan against the Chinese to prevent Chinese aggression. So a lot of people have been saying to me they worry that Liz Truss in the PM position could be a bit risky for the country. She might like to portray herself as the Iron Lady, but according to the people on the street here, she's not really the Iron Lady for them.
Interesting words there from the people of the Norfolk constituency that Liz Truss represents. Of course, she's also seen as one of the biggest fiscal hawks. Perhaps that may play in to what might be more of an economic election than we've seen before for the soul of the Conservative Party. Well, let's turn now to Ellie Costello, who's in Jeremy Hunt's constituency, and Jeremy Hunt has not been shy about setting out his stall to be leader of the Conservative Party for several weeks now. Of course, he came second to Boris Johnson last time around. Ellie, what do the people of, I believe, the Surrey constituency that Jeremy Hunt represents, what are the people there saying?
Well, good morning to you, Tom, and welcome to the beautiful town of Hazelmere in southwest Surrey, which, as you say, is Jeremy Hunt's seat. He has held this seat since 2005, so very popular MP here. Everyone that we're speaking to this morning describes him as a good listener and a very good constituency MP. He does seem to be very popular here. He hasn't officially put himself forward as a candidate for Tory party leader yet, but the Independent newspaper has put him as favourite alongside Tom Tugendhat.